Good morning, everybody. Make sure we got this going. All right. Well, thank you all for coming out on a nice frigid January morning. My name's Tommy Purdom. I'm the resource conservationist for the Kane DuPage Soil and Water Conservation District. We got some great speakers here today, so I'm just going to give you a brief overview and some updates that we have on some sides. So this is our annual soil erosion sediment control program seminar. The Slido, like I mentioned before, has kind of some background information. If you feel free to go through that kind of throughout the course of the day, just kind of take an overview of that. Group numbers up top, if you're having issues with that, feel free to let me know. There's been some issues that they've been having the last couple days, so hopefully it should resolve itself. But yeah, so a little bit of a background on SWCDs. I think a lot of you have worked with us in the past or are familiar with us, but if you're not, in 1937, the Soil and Water Conservation Districts Act was adopted. So this was after Dust Bowl and Depression era large-scale erosion events and a lot of degradation of farmland. So the Soil and Water Conservation Districts were formed. So we're a locally organized and operated unit of government. We function under state law, so promoting protection, maintenance, improvement, and wise use of soil and water and the related resources in the district. So with that allows us to do a lot of different things. So part of what we do is education and outreach. With this program, putting on seminars each year, we try to outreach with the community, local contractors, engineering firms, state, local, county officials, as well as promoting watershed planning, technical assistance, both on the agricultural conservation side and urban sustainable development. With that, we partner with different organizations. So we have memorandums of understanding with municipalities, with the Army Corps of Engineers, with the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, as part of our soil erosion sediment control plan. So part of this, we review engineering plans and soil erosion sediment control plans, as well as industry means and methods for any Army Corps jurisdictional waterways and wetlands. Through this, we'll just review the plans, make sure they're utilizing the best management practices, making sure that the plans are as set as possible, and then performing inspections throughout the course of the ongoing project up until final closeout. And then issuing any reports as needed as it's going through and making recommendations based on what we're seeing. So through this, we partner with, we have a partnership with different municipalities. So I'd like to thank you all for coming out for today. Those that we've partnered with in the past, and if you're interested in what that looks like, feel free to reach out to myself or to Kat, our administrative coordinator. So in the district news, we have a board of directors. They direct what we do, so it's a board of 5 directors. We have an election coming up, so every 2 years we have 3 seats up for election, 2 years in the off year, or 2 electors in the off year. So February 10th, if you own land or reside in Kane or DuPage County and you're over the age of 18, you're entitled to vote. So please do so. We have it at 2 locations this year. So at our district office in St. Charles and the DuPage County Farm Bureau in Gary Avenue and Carroll Stream. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out to us or to look on the website as well for additional elector slates and any additional information for those as we're going through. So we also have Envirothon, which is a Northeastern Illinois, well, it's a state and nationwide program for environmental science students, a competition. The special topic this year is going to be non-point source pollution. So this is extremely important, and we're still looking for sponsors. So if anybody is interested in becoming a sponsor for this program, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll make sure that can go on. So that's occurring March 17th and 18th. Both days are going to be at the Morton Arboretum for the Northeastern Illinois. And then the winner of that will go down to the state competition, and then whoever wins the state competition will be able to go down to nationals. So if anybody's interested in that, please reach out. One update on the IDOT side. So last fall, DOT, their Bureau of Design and Environment, they announced the erosion control blankets used on IDOT projects must have a natural fiber net or the lino weave. So this is going to eliminate the use of plastic netted erosion control blankets. Carrying out this change, there were some revisions made to section 41 and 59 of the BDE manual. So that's going to remove the heavy-duty ECB pay item, as well as it revised the remaining pay items defined to BioNet or the EC blanket products containing the lino weave and net with movable joints. So this is going to ensure both wildlife friendly and friendly to humanity for the projects on IDOT. This came on the heels of a study that came from University of Illinois in Champaign that was completed in 2023. So there's also some work going on of the Illinois Tollway. For the research, NIU is being used to detect microplastics in stormwater. So a lot of similar actions have been taken at the state transportation departments recently. It's mostly just internal guidance, though, and there's no federal directive or ban on any plastic netting, just advisory guidance that they have from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife at this time. So we have that update going on as well. That's also been announced on our Illinois Urban Manual. Some updates from the last time that we talked. We have our temporary riprap causeway practice standard 956. Has been approved by the technical review committee as well as the steering committee, and that should be up on the website coming up very shortly once we get the final approval from IEPA. We have some updates to the website. We've updated the background sections 1 through 3, as well as added a quick reference guide, which kind of takes over for that field manual that's been used in the past, where it's just kind of those quick hitters for the main practices that are used out in the field. We've also implemented a newsletter. If there's anybody interested in sponsoring that, we do have sponsorship availability for being able to run through that, just giving kind of the basic updates for the manual, as well as calendars. We have plenty of calendars. If you don't have one yet, we have boxes at the front door, so please take one on your way out. As well as we have detention basin standards and drawings, which are currently in review and are going to be up on the Army Corps website for public comment for the 30-day period. They're looking to be up this week. So if you don't see it up there yet, just feel free to reach out and we can send you a link or the actual standards or drawings later on with that. But I think with that, just another reminder for the Slido that we have. We'll utilize this especially at the end, so just making sure that you have that link set up to there. But I think that is about it for me, so I'll let it get on to here. So we have Michelle Anderson is going to be the first speaker. I'm sorry, Michelle Zimmerman. Speaking, yeah. Michelle Zimmerman with the City of Algonquin. She's going to talk about CityWorks and their asset management system.
Good morning. I am Michelle Zimmerman. I am the Assistant Public Works Director for the Village of Algonquin, and I'm going to talk to you this morning about our asset management system. We use CityWorks, which ties into our GIS. So I'm just going to go through some things that we do with that, show you some of our asset layers, what we do, and the things we do to use it to manage. The first thing I wanted to start off with is we do use our system. Let's get to this. And like I had said earlier, this is a live connection into CityWorks, so I kind of like to do the presentation just showing it in action and what we're doing and how we're using it. I like to start off with the service requests. So in Algonquin, we've been paperless for quite some time now. When phone calls or anything comes in, we don't take anything down on paper or write it. We also, for the most part, don't do any call transferring. Everybody in our village is instructed to use CityWorks and put in a service request. So we have service requests are tied right in here. You can do a new request through the system. A phone call taker can put it right in. It could be an issue with like a tree, and they can find, you know, that a branch fell out of my tree, and we can bring this up and put the information in here about what happened. So we'll put Main Street, and then dead branch, and then I can put in the caller information. And then my phone, and then save. And what's really interesting is this all comes into the appropriate inboxes immediately. So here's my open surface requests, and I just put that in as a call taker, and it came up right here. It gets submitted to the parks team and to Brad, who is the supervisor. He gets an email. Some people have it set up to their phone. So we're in real time, the way that we can deal with any incidents or problems that come in, assess if they're needed immediately, if we can wait, if we can create a work order from the service request, which we can do through here for the crews to schedule work or go out and do the work immediately. So it's a really neat system the way that we do this. This also connects into an app called C-Click Fix. That way residents or anybody, they can take a picture when they're out and about. They can submit the service request directly through their phone to get information to get information to us immediately. That kind of works. Like, I'm gonna have Brad do an example of one. So he just did. And you'll see here in a minute. So he did this animal issue. This is really great because this just came in as there's a deer jumping into the burn piles. This is really a service request that had come in previously about we were doing some burn piles on a restoration, and a resident actually called in concerned that the deer were going to jump into the burn piles and burn up and die. So we're laughing because this really did come in. But we get this immediately so that we can address these issues instantly. What is really interesting about this might be a dead animal or something in the roadway. It comes to the crews immediately. So somebody might be working in the area, and when they're coming back on a break or a lunch, they can stop by the area and pick it up. Saves time, saves efficiency. It ties in with, I don't have it here, but our AVL system where we know where all the vehicles and all the crews are working. So we can dispatch people to handle anything that we might need to take care of immediately based on where their location is. And again, no, we don't do any call transferring. We try not to do any voicemails. We try not to jump people around the system for getting a service done or who they're supposed to talk to. What we have done with the information on the service requests is this feedback a little, is that a little better? This is not loading. Well, I was going to show you a really cool analysis of how we use this, but it is not loading up. So here it comes. So through our service requests over all the years, we have some report compiling now, and I can look at through the years since we started using the service requests in 2020 through the current year, we can assess what types of requests are coming in and do some graphing and how much are coming in each year. And then I also have by month, so we can kind of assess. Can you hear me a little better? Can you still hear me without the feedback? So we can see what's coming in by month, the highest months that are coming in, how many service requests we're getting over the years. For the last, since 2020, we've received over 17,000 service requests. And then this is interesting information because it tells each year when you put it in the category that it is, so we can see which things that we're getting the most service requests about up here on this chart. It's not coming in. If I go back to, so of course, one of the biggest things we get is construction questions. If I zoom in on this, our top things are just our sidewalk program. We get a lot of information or a lot of requests on that. Our water quality, water treatment issues, water pressure issues, a lot comes in on that. It's really great information to have. As I'll show you last year's data. We go down here. So this is all of the service requests for 2025 that were closed out. So usually, and it's been consistent to analyze the data over the years, some of our biggest things that we have coming in are about trees and dead, damaged, broken. What is great about this is using this information to make real-time decisions and what we're doing and how we're managing public works. So the great example about the tree one is every year we do a community survey. And over the years, the community survey has showed that people kind of generally think that parkway trees aren't really that important, that we shouldn't be spending a lot of money or time or anything doing that. And it comes in low rated on the community survey. Based on that, we had money in our budget for tree trimming over all of the years, and it's in the general fund, so it's competing with a lot of other funding. And Village Hall and the village manager's office, in looking at things that we needed to do, they wanted to cut our tree trimming program. And we were able to use the data in city work, and they wanted to cut the program because they said on the community survey, this is coming in really low, this isn't important, we don't think this is a great service. We were able to use the service request data and go through all the years, and pretty much the #1 service request that comes in is regarding trees. Dead, damaged, broken, storm damage, whatever. And your tree trimming program is very important to managing storms and the health of your trees. So we said we can't cut the trimming program. This is the thing that we get the most calls about. So the community survey and the perception of what was going on didn't match the real-time data of what is happening in our operation every single day. So just an interesting little tidbit about the service requests and being able to see what's going on and managing the data. So I will move on now to some of our assets. Every asset in the village, everything that we go out and touch every day is a layer in our GIS system. So anything we do to anything, a site amenity, a tree, our stormwater, it's a layer in our GIS and it's tied to a work order so that every day we can track what work is being done to what things. I'm gonna start with since we're at a soil and water seminar, I'm gonna start by showing our storm sewer layer. So this is our storm sewer, it's all mapped out. I have our storm structures and our gravity mains on. And you can see, we know everything by an inlet, a manhole, a catch basin. We can pick these assets here, and then I can find out information about what's selected, what manhole it goes to, so we can trace flow of where things are going, who owns it or maintains it, what type of thing it is. If it's a structure, we know if it's an inlet, a manhole, some information on the diameter. We have elevations on some of our assets so that we can use these for repairs and also for stormwater flow. And we use them for spill incidents to see where if something gets dumped or on the road, we can see where it's draining to. All of our assets, when we are out in the field working, we do a work order. And these were set up by our department so that we could select the assets and record all the work that we were doing on them. So if I want to go, since we started this in about 2020, I can go in here and I can see all the work we're doing on our storm structures. So I can pick these and then ask to highlight them on the map. And so for all the years, here's all the locations where we've done storm structure repairs since we started doing this in our asset management program. Just to dial that down a little bit, I can go in here and let's say I just want to see what I did in 2025. These are closed dates. There's a couple this year. So I can go through and I can pick everything in 2025. And I just want to see those on the map. So the blue marks are all the repairs we did in 2025. From all of this data and the work orders, if I open one of these, you can see that we have information in there about what kind of work was done, who did it. This is not a good example of one. Let me pick another one. Let's go with this one. And then there's the cost. So there's a section in here where you can put your equipment and your labor and your materials, and you can add your cost, which we do. And then the work has an overall cost to what it is. I can take this information in any of these work orders, take this data, and export it into an Excel sheet, which I already did ahead of time. So this is the data on all of the storm structure repairs that we've done throughout the years, exported it, and then I can take and manipulate or use this data for any type of reporting I need to do, whether it's if I'm the supervisor, whether it's to the department head. We use a lot of this information on our MS4 reporting, which I'll show you how we do some of that. And just kind of I took this and summarized it. So if I want to know the work that I did and how much I spent through all the years, here's the number of structures that we did. This is just a big overall report, and the amount that we spent each year. I could dial this down and then I could go in 2025, here, I can break it further down by the category. I just didn't do that for this, but I can say in 2025, what type of structure repair did we do, and I can break it down that way. That's one of the ways that we do the storm structures. Another interesting thing that we do here, let me clear this map. We do an annual cleaning of our stormwater structures. This is something we do for the MS4, and it's a measurable goal that we report. So we do have a work order that's done every year on our annual cleaning, which these are all the work orders over the years that we've done. I'll go to 2025 again, and here are the storm structures we cleaned. Here are the assets that are attached to that work order. I want to highlight these on the map. So as I go through the years, we were on like a 5-year rotating schedule through the village for the cleaning. So I can see what I've done every year, which structures I've done. We hire a contractor for this, so the overall cost for it for this year is right there. In the work order, we do record when the contractor, he brings the debris to our facility and we put it in a dumpster. So we do know how many yards of debris we are removing from our catch basins. And so that is our measurable goal on one of our MS4 requirements about cleaning and sediment control and cleanup. I do have a little report kind of that I did on that. So through the years since we started doing this in 2018, I can show the number of structures that were cleaned, the debris removed, our cost. And over all the years, we have 627 yards of sediment and debris removed from our catch basins, inlets a little bit, manholes, and a cost of $1.1 million. This is something I want to show too on assets in our, and we divide these out by, on the mapping, by kind of division. So we have, if you can see, like water is all of our water mains, sewer is all the different sewer mains, storm is everything having to do with storm. Another neat layer that we have in storm sewers is detention basins. So we have all of the detention basins in the village mapped out, and they're in the system by ownership, which is really important when we have problems, flooding, backup, cleaning, repairs that need to be done. And then we can do work orders on those. Selecting these is kind of a neat feature. We can pick anything here and get the information on what type it is. So we know if it's just open water, if it's naturalized, if it's turf grass. That helps with sometimes management or maintenance, although we don't have any turf grass basins left in the village. With any of our assets, I can look at them by an asset search. So I can go into the detention basins, for example, and I want to know all of the detention basins in the village that have a naturalized bottom and turf grass side slopes. This might be because we're going to send something out to all the private owners about maintenance of their basins or the condition that they're in after we've done an assessment. So I can pick these and I can search. And then these are all those basins with that kind of condition to them. I can highlight them and bring them up on the map. And it's kind of hard to see, but you can see how it highlighted every basin that has that kind of condition. We use this a lot for the ones that the village owns because I can also do this same search. I'll just do stormwater detention basins. And I can do owned by, Village of Algonquin. Search. Which is kind of cool. This is one way we help manage what we're doing, but then it's highlighting all the basins we own, bringing them up. I can do reporting that shows acreage, install dates, what type of basin, again, just to help with management or data reporting. I'm going to go into this in a little bit on our natural area layer because these are also in that, and we can show how much money we're spending on maintenance of our detention basins that are part of our natural areas management program. So we can pull data out of our system based on that. Just another cool feature in our stormwater layer. We do have some, just as part of the MS4 requirements, and because we are forward thinking in Algonquin, we do have a lot of stormwater quality structures. You know, the big storm scepter things. We have I don't know, 4 or 5 different types. We do have all those mapped out because we do a yearly cleaning of those. But we can go through and we can look for those specifically in our mapping. So I want to bring this off and then put on our quality structures so that we can see where these are located in the village. And they're on a different cleaning program also, so anything with a star is a water quality structure. Again, we use this for MS4 to show what we have, where they are. It shows what type of asset that is. And we also have this where our quality structure, we have a work order based on that because we clean those on a yearly basis. Again, then we record what the cost was, cleaned out, how many yards of debris were removed, because we can also report that as a measurable goal. So if I kind of pulled that out, you know, took that data, pulled it out, thought I had a little report. I didn't make a report on that. But again, you can see I can take these work orders. Let's just grab them for a second. And I can export all this data for costing to a spreadsheet. And again, then I can use this to do all different types of reporting based on all the fields that are in that work order, cost, type, you know, whatever I'm looking to do. So that is some of the things we do with our storm sewer layer that are fun, interesting, and again, used for maintenance as well as reporting for NPDES. Another layer that we have, because we are all about green infrastructure in the village of Algonquin, we do have a natural area layer. Just bring this up for you. These are all the village-owned natural areas. The red are the sites that have been restored and that we manage, and the yellow are the sites that are not managed, that are waiting for a restoration. I can choose these to get information about what any of them might be, which is important for our management program. So this is our Broadsmore Drive natural area. It was restored in 2023. Here's the acreage, and it's managed, and the management unit that it's used the way that we do our 3-year management program. So we get asked all the time how many acres of restored natural area we have, green spaces we have in the village. We use this report all the time to look at our acreage. So like I said, off of those reports, I can pull this out and I can say, we have restored and managed 469 acres, and we have about 319 left to go for natural area restoration. Again, just everything that's an asset, when there's work done to it, either by a contractor or in-house, we do a work order. So for natural areas and stormwater, we have a work order work order templates for all of those. You can see them all set up in my inbox. In my inbox, I'm looking at everything. So I'm looking at every work order that's in the system every day, and I can look and see what work's being done, work has been being done across the board with, you can see all the different assets that we have up here. So I'm being able to monitor this happening every day. But for our natural area maintenance program is a really robust program that we do in the village and that we fund, that we care a lot about and spend a lot of time on. So we do record all of the information regarding the maintenance of this area. We have maintenance work orders that indicate what was done, where it was done. Some of the stuff is done in-house. Some of it is done by contractors. Brad does a great job of recording all of this information about what we're doing on there. We have a 3-year maintenance cycle for our restored natural areas. They get burned 1 year. The next year they get selective herbicide treatments, maybe a mowing. Then the 3rd year they lie dormant, and then they start the cycle over again. This is important because we're being able to find out long-term costs. The long-term cost for the maintenance of our natural areas. We can compare this to regular landscape areas and areas that we mow. I have I'll show you these are the kind of the maintenance work orders we've done over time. I think since 2020, 2018, what we've been doing on all these areas. Again, I took this information, I exported it. What's interesting is then we can do some reporting on what's going on. So, you know, I exported all the raw data here in the work order template. I go back to this. When we do the template, you put in your information and then you have a drop down of what kind of work was done there so that we can categorize this and figure out where we're spending the most funding on our natural areas, what we're doing, is that effective? When I pulled all that data out over since 2019, I broke this one out into a more detailed report so I can see each year the type of work that we're doing and how much we've spent, then totaled it through the years. I don't have 2025s in here yet because we were still getting some work orders in, but you can see that here are the different types of maintenance that we're doing, the costs each year. You can imagine how many ways we can analyze this data and summarize it. Just the summary over all of the years. We spend the most amount of money on weed control, so selective herbicide, also with woody species, the resprouts, any of that, we're spending a lot of time on that. And then of course our prescribed burns, which are super important. So we do want to see that number up there and the top thing that we're spending money on. I love this data because you can see each year it kind of change. The numbers going up because we keep restoring and adding natural area. So my maintenance costs are going up each year. But if we average this out through the years, so I showed that we had 469 acres of restored natural area. So you can see my costs here. I should have averaged it. But let's say that 469 acres, let's say it's averaging me $130,000 to manage that each year. For our mowed and our landscape areas, we do contract that through a landscaper where they come in and do maintenance of the formal landscape beds and mowing. We have 350 acres of landscape beds and mowed areas. 350 acres of formal landscaping through our contract is about $350,000 a year. So is great numbers to show native restoration, native spaces. You have to have both in your community, so there is always going to be a cost to that, but it does give some really great data about saving a lot of money on doing natural area restoration. This is just a kind of a neat little one that we do, but we do go actively pick up trash in our natural areas. Super easy, good, measurable goal for our MS4 program. So here's the work orders where we're doing yearly or bi-yearly trash pickup. We can show you pick the asset, you attach it to the work order. We kind of try to do it by like 55-gallon bags and how many we remove, because that's kind of a good number to do some reporting to the EPA. And I have that, like I kind of just threw that down here. So over the years that we've been doing it since 2019, we've collected about 565 55-gallon trash bags of trash from stormwater basins and natural areas. All the natural areas in some way, shape, or form convey stormwater. So that's how they tie into what we're doing with stormwater and our MS4, because every single one of them is either a creek corridor, a detention basin. It has something to do that receives water from stormwater. How am I doing on time? Got a little bit more time. Those are just some things I wanted to show you that kind of deal with stormwater and how we use our system for that. How we have the assets in there and what they look like. Let's clear this. But I do want to show you our other layers because they are really neat in the way that we do other assets too. I'm going to show you trees, which is really cool. This one off of here. These are just the village-owned parkway trees. So anything in parks, we have an inventory of every tree in the village that's owned by the village. as we dive into this. So I can look at any of these. I can select this asset, and I can get information on exactly what it is. So you can, like through my asset search, like I showed you before, we might be having a problem with oaks that we have to do some progressive treatment or preventative maintenance. So I can go in here and say, find me, we did this for that when we had emerald ash borer. We used this system to target all the ash trees because we went through and removed them all instead of doing any treatment to try to get ahead of it and get new trees planted right away. But I can go in here and, I don't know, let's just pick silver maple. We do have problems with silver maple. We're starting to try to target some of these species that were planted 30, 40 years ago as parkway trees that really have issues now with girdling roots. I think cracking in the trunks, a lot of damage during storms. So I can see where all of my silver maples are, highlight them on the map, and then you can do any kind of maintenance program because you know where the location is, which I love this. Oops. This is the east side of town, which is the older side of town where things were built in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And what I just told you, where they used to think that was a favorable parkway tree, you can see where all those are located and where our education and knowledge and experiences come in. Our west side of our village here is the newly developed side, and you can see how the silver maple is no longer a parkway tree that we planted. So again, another thing that you can use, that we use the data for. With our work order system, let's get this map up. We've designed our work orders so that your GIS system, right, you have to update the data in it a lot. We have a person that works in Public Works that's dedicated just to that, an on-staff employee that does nothing but Public Works updates. We have set up our work orders that when we can, we have them update GIS automatically. One of the assets that we do that for are the trees. Zoom this in. Just kind of want to show you that. So I'll show you this. We have a tree planting work order. These are the open tree planting work orders. Let's just go to this one. Remember to change this when I'm done with my presentation. I'm going to find this on the map. So we do have a contractor that comes in and does our tree planting program. So the contractor, we'll give them city works or we'll do this in-house. He's going to come plant this tree on this work order. So you can see on my map now, I'll do this. The tree is yellow and here's the little thing. That means that it's an open planting space. We have some other symbols that mean different things. For instance, the big red one is, must contact resident. So we have certain residents that are angry when we trim their tree or anything. So I can look up the trees that are this symbol here, and knowing when we're having a trimming program or whatever, that there's people that we do have to notify ahead of time. Otherwise they're going to be calling the trustees or the mayor or showing up at the board meeting. So another way that we use the assets to do our daily work and manage those one-off things that come up in what you're doing daily in your job. This I want to just show how when we do a tree planting work order, For this particular one, my tree was yellow on the map. I come in here and we planted a black alder. It was 3 inches. This is just Julie information, so you would put this in correctly. Save that. The other thing this shows is in our work orders, we do have tasks. So that way we can stage the work depending on if we're doing it or the contractor's doing it. We can stage in calling in Julie's. When the Julie's are done, the tree is pre-Julie, and then when the Julie task is done, we mark this task as done, and then we know here's the ones that are ready for planting because the Julies are in. I'm just going to go to this and say that these are all done. And then I'm going to say I finished this work order. So this is the other data you can track: who closes what work orders, who did the work. You can look it up by employee in the Elm. Let's say I finished this today. I'm going to close this. Oops. Doesn't like it when you don't put in a required field. Give this a minute. So now back on my map. If I refresh this, oops. Just want to show you how this, so our work order, there was my tree that was yellow. The work order, by closing it, it automatically turned the tree green, and it put in all the information in the work order about what I planted, when I planted it, and the size of it. Super important. We do a 5-year inspection of all of our trees, well, more like 7 years, inspection of all our trees for the trimming program. We update this information, and so we have a ton of data on what's happening, what we're trimming. I can go to the map. This is another great tool that we use. You can go to the map, you can select, like, here's the call that we get all the time, not just about trees, but you've never touched my parkway tree or done any maintenance to it. You don't come out here, you never pay attention to me, and so I can select this or any asset in front of this home, and I can say, search work orders. And now I can tell this resident that in 2021, we were in fact at your home in these 2 trees and we did trim them. And then I have 2 work orders that are open, which means that they're also expected to be getting trimmed this winter. So that is another way that we use this system. Let me just kind of show you while I have just a little bit more time. Some of our other layers that are kind of neat. And I won't go into other things that we do on those, but just so you can see what we have in here. So everything is in here, you can see. Landscape areas, mowing areas. This is a cool one. We have our site amenities and playgrounds. So every park in the village is in here. I can see, and again, these all have work orders, everything associated with them. I can come here, I can see that in Stony Brook, we have 2 playgrounds that are 5 to 12-year-old appropriate. We have one that's a 2 to 5. Here's all our site amenities. People will call in, they want to have a picnic or an event. We know how many picnic tables are there, you know, what facilities or amenities. It kind of everything shows up, like bike racks, tree grates. A question that we get a lot is, I think this was in playgrounds. Swings. People have different disabilities where they're looking for inclusive playground equipment. So we can go to parks and we can select by our swings, like, and I can look this up, this particular thing has a toddler swing and a belt swing. People will ask us all the time, I have a little 2-year-old, what parks can I take them to that have a toddler swing? I have an autistic child, plus they're going out to play. Where are my swings that are inclusive or multi-person swings? Those are questions that we get. We can look up and let people know where to go in our village to find some of these amenities. Again, age-appropriate playgrounds. My time's almost up, but just 2 more things I'm going to show you quick, and then we're good, right? Signs. We have all of our signs in here. Again, we do work, and all of these things I'm showing you all have work orders associated with them where I can pull out any kind of data or reporting. So every sign is in here that's in the village, and its little symbol. So that's kind of cool, where we monitor what we're doing. We have a sign inspection program, and every 5 years we switch out anything that isn't meeting the MUTCD regulations for reflectivity or repair the poles or anything. Another fun layer that we use, and another one of my favorite ones is our trails and paths layer. We use this all the time for bike path connections, trail connections. We do a lot of road projects. New development is coming in. We get a lot of grant funding. I use this frequently, and it's all organized by ownership so that we can see where all the trails and paths connect in Algonquin. So anytime a new subdivision is coming in, or we're doing a road reconstruction project, especially like ones that are federally funded that usually have matching funds for trails, we can go in here and we know where everything's going, where we can make connections. It's organized by type. So if I can throw this on with the sign layer, and just kind of how you can mix layers to get information. Because some of these are off street, some of them are on street, but you can put that in tandem with the sign. If I pick the asset, it will tell me that it it's not showing. This one's off street, and if I bring it up in conjunction with the sign layer, you can see where it shows. Here's my signage on the part of the trail that's on the road. So it's showing me, here's my bike route and the areas where it's going. So you can kind of use them in tandem where you're answering questions, figuring out things, planning, marking routes. You can go right off of your GIS. So anyway, just a couple, that's kind of our asset management, how we use it, what we do, a few of our cool layers, and some of the data reporting and the things that we can do with this. So I don't know if questions now or later or anything. Go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about your transition from not having the asset management to I guess, getting this in terms of getting the buy-in from the village board to, because it's quite an expense in order to agree to that. So can you just talk about that a little bit,
Yep.
I guess?
It wasn't a problem with the village board. We have a great IT department. I think everybody knows, like, it was just, that's where technology is going. So we didn't have a problem because they just said pick what we wanted and what we thought would work. So they supported that. Getting it up and running and getting the crews on board was an absolute nightmare. People weren't, and a lot of the labor force wasn't used to using technology in their daily work environment. So it was really a struggle. We went through a lot of growing pains setting it up and getting the assets in there because originally IT just did it, and we failed to have a team. So IT set it up, put everything in there, trying to figure it out by talking to the laborers, and what we ended up with was a ton of these layers that had completely inaccurate information. They weren't able to, the information in the fields you set up for your assets matters, because we put things in here by the way we would call them in Algonquin, not the industry standard. So it came to where, like, if we wanted to report doing things in-house versus contracted, we didn't have the right fields and the right data in there to compare what we were doing. So it was kind of set up wrong, and it was just the education and getting people to use technology was difficult. I will tell you that the first 5 years of getting the assets, and then we had them doing work orders, and nothing was coming out of the system. And so we kind of stepped in, and I had stepped in as kind of the head of, and made a team that went from the labor M1 all the way up to the public works director, and what everybody was needing for assets, reporting, managing, and then we built the system around that. That first 5 years, we took everything and hit delete. It was unusable, inaccurate data that was useless. We had to start from scratch from the team approach, being able to compare it. So that was another huge growing step. So yeah, slowly we came on board. There were a handful of people that quit because they did not want to use technology in their position. Everybody else stuck with it. We started to introduce iPads and the phone. We're to the point now where everybody wants an iPad because they want to do all their work on CityWorks. Nobody wants to use anything that's paper or any way of doing it. They all want their own personal iPad, and they want to do everything through that. The great thing about that is, in some of the data analysis, those people that I told you that left the village, there was a handful of them that did, and other reasons. We reduced our staff in the last 10 years by maybe 15 people, and we have hired maybe only 3 back. Again, because we're doing asset management and we have this all organized, we didn't need to hire back all those additional laborers. We are now, because we're expanding and we have new subdivisions, but we didn't have to replace what was lost once we were managing it and using the system efficiently.
So as a follow-up to that, Michelle, so you said, like, it sounded like you started with a system before 5 years ago.
Yes.
But 5 years ago, it's like kind of finally got it all together the way you wanted it, and it worked for your community, your public works.
Yeah, we started with CityWorks 12, 13 years ago, and that first 5 to 6 years of CityWorks, we had to throw in the garbage. And then we had to restart it again and rethink it. So it is what you see now. Okay.
Is this a software program you buy and then have yourself, or is there an annual subscription to, like, is it Trimble CityWorks?
Yeah, we bought it, and there is an annual fee for it. So we do pay that. It's, I can't remember, I think Trimble owns it now, or somebody, I don't know. CityWorks was in and of itself, but I think Trimble bought them because they tied in with the GIS. We went with CityWorks because it ties directly into, so these maps and my assets, you can tie your work orders directly to the assets, and it integrates, which is why we chose to go this way.
For the initial data sets, were you using interns or full-timers?
A little bit of both. We used a lot of in-house staff to collect data. We used IT, we used summer help, and interns to get the data collected. And just over the years, it's in here, which there's a GIS edit work order, so the data continues to get more accurate over time. So when you're out in the field and you notice something's inaccurate or something's changed, you do a new work order that's GIS edits, and this goes right to that individual in Public Works, and it might say, this was not a manhole, this was a catch basin. And so they get that work order in, and they're constantly in real time updating on a daily basis our assets.
Do you tie in like reviews or new development reviews at all through this?
We don't tie in new development reviews because we do that through Bluebeam. But what we do is we tie in construction projects. So if we have a major road construction project coming up, we have a work order that's pre-construction, and our engineers will go out and they will set up a work order that says, go inspect all the storm sewer, go inspect all the water main, and it goes to the appropriate supervisor so that they go out, they'll televise, they'll do inspections of all those infrastructure pieces, they'll come back to the engineer, he runs a report. That's like, I'll kind of show you one of those quick. So here's one where we had a project, and they go out and they inspect everything ahead of time, and then there's it's this project and this name, and so we might say these storm structures are failing or separated, or this pipe is separated. He gets all of that. He's able to incorporate that onto the engineering, the construction project, if it's like a road resurfacing or reconstruction. And that is helping us to be like, hey, we just redid the road, and a year later the storm sewer collapsed, and now we're digging up the new road. We're trying to put all these things as part of that construction project. So we use it to do the pre-inspections. They gather the data. He runs a report off of all the structures inspected. Here's these ones by their number. It needs to be lined. It needs to be reset. It needs to be rehabbed. They all go on the engineering plan right off the work orders. So we do use it for that. Awesome. Well, thank you. Oh. Go ahead.
Can you, for city works, can you tie to like a parcel, I guess, like a plat or like
Yep.
documents as well?
Yep. There's a layer on here, and I won't put it on. It's down here, but these are the parcels, and we can bring all kinds of stuff up on here. We have like contours. I mean, I'm showing you like the tip. Tax parcels right here. So I can select this on any address. It brings this up. Here's my tax parcel. And here's the link right to the county. So now it's going to show me the county data on that tax parcel, on that particular, yeah.
We give a big round of applause for Michelle. All right, we're going to get started with the next talk here. We got Hannah Miller from the Conservation Foundation is going to be talking about their Smart Salt program, Salt Smart program, and yeah, I'll let her take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am Hannah Miller. I work for the Conservation Foundation. I help coordinate the Salt Smart collaborative program that we have, as well as I work with some of our various watershed work groups on chloride-specific issues. And so just briefly, I'm just going to kind of do a big run through of a lot of resources that are available to you, as well as kind of go through good practices, as well as kind of what this issue with salt is and why it's something we should pay attention to. So the Conservation Foundation, just in case you're not familiar with who we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are an accredited land trust. We primarily work within Kane, DuPage, Kendall, and Will counties, with some of our work actually taking us elsewhere into DeKalb, LaSalle, Grundy, and even Cook County as well. Kind of when I see our mission and what that really boils down to me is that we save land and we save rivers. I work in our watershed programs, which is kind of especially where the Salt Smart program really lives. We work with a variety of watershed work groups across this region, providing professional and technical staffing to these groups, but also kind of really to help support a lot of the projects that these groups are doing. Out of an education and outreach campaign from these watershed work groups actually grew the Salt Smart Collaborative. It is a program that is meant to help to elevate the message of reducing the impacts of chlorides and salt on our local waterways, on our local environment. We have a variety of partners across our region that we work with on this, stretching all the way up through McHenry and Lake counties and all the way down through Will County as well. So we kind of go all over the place with this program. It's a neat partnership across a variety of organizations, all with that same mission and same goal of reducing salt use. It's a clearinghouse of resources, and towards the end, I will also kind of talk through and share our website with you so that you can see what resources are available to you as well. But we have resources that are geared towards the general public, like residents, but also to property managers, private snow management companies, as well as all of our public agencies. We're always working to fill gaps in our materials. So if you have any ideas about materials that you would like to see that would be useful to you and your communities, I would love to hear about that so that we can create resources that are going to be useful and used by your organizations. So really, when we're talking about salt, the question always inevitably comes up of safety versus the environment. Road salt is a necessity for public safety on our roads during the winter time. But unfortunately, we waste a lot of salt every storm. I am confident everybody here has probably seen sidewalks that look like that, caked in salt during the winter time, or have seen pretty big spills on the roadways or in the parking lots. And unfortunately, a lot of that salt is just wasted every storm, making its way into our natural environment. But the good thing is that there are best management practices that you can take advantage of to maintain safety, be proactive, save time and money, and waste a whole lot less salt. And there are a wide variety of reasons to be salt smart. And your reason to be salt smart might be different than my reason to be salt smart, and that is completely okay. You might want to be salt smart to have safe surfaces. You might want to be salt smart to reduce the corrosion and damage to your built infrastructure. You might want to be salt smart to have efficient winter operations. You might want to be salt smart because you're trying to meet your budget, use less salt, and save money. But you also might want to be salt smart to protect our natural environment. Personally, that's my why when we're talking about this, but your why might be different. Whatever your reason is to bring you to this table, I am happy to welcome you to the salt reduction table. We want you to be part of this conversation. And when I'm talking about chlorides, we're really talking about salt. The most common form of chloride that we see is coming from sodium chloride, which is road salt, which is also called rock salt, and often called dry salt. Brine, you'll hear me talk about brine later, just so we're all on the same page with this. That is a mixture of salt and water done to a very specific concentration, a specific ratio, so that it's most effective. There are also other forms of chloride that we might see used, especially calcium chloride, magnesium chloride, less so potassium chloride during the winter time, but that one is very common in fertilizers. And when we're looking at, especially here in Northeast Illinois, the largest source of chloride is absolutely the salt that we put out on our roadways, parking lots, sidewalks during the winter time. We do see some influence from water softeners, especially the further you get out from Lake Michigan, where that drinking water is now coming from groundwater. But typically, 9 times out of 10, the largest source of chloride here in Northeast Illinois is absolutely the salt we use during the winter time. And unfortunately, the chloride levels in our rivers and streams are rising, as well as in our groundwater. And once it gets into the water, it is prohibitively expensive and extremely difficult to remove. And when I say prohibitively expensive, I'm really talking in like the billions of dollars prohibitively expensive. Our wastewater treatment plants don't have that technology to be able to remove it, and that technology that they would use is stupid expensive. And it only takes a single teaspoon of salt to pollute 5 gallons of water. So that's a single teaspoon, that 5-gallon Home Depot bucket. So it doesn't take much, and every little bit that we reduce really does make a big difference. When we talk to our public works folks, and I talk to our roads crews, our parking lots and sidewalks maintenance teams, when we put this in perspective for them, say a 50-pound bag of rock salt pollutes about the equivalent of a professional-sized hockey rink. A ton of road salt pollutes about the equivalent of an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And so when you start putting that in perspective for them, they start grasping this picture that really every little bit counts, that even if they're just cutting back a little bit in small ways, it really does make a big difference with the amount of road salt that is ultimately reaching our local waterways and the environment. And we see this chloride lingering in our local waterways well into the springtime. This data is averaged data over the last 10 years at Salt Creek at the Wolf Road crossing there. And I've called out here the 500 milligrams per liter state standard, so that's gonna be the top arrow. Your bottom arrow is where our local watershed work groups have identified chloride impacts to aquatic life. So we see impacts even at as low as 150 milligrams per liter. So when we start adding salt to the system during the winter, our chloride levels rise. And then it takes a very long time for them to come back down to background levels, when in the springtime especially, where that chloride is again going to be most impactful to our aquatic life. So my goal with this is we know you need to put salt out during the winter time, but where we can reduce this curve, shrink it a little bit. We can bring it down a little bit. I would be super excited to see that. And it is something where how our systems and flow works is that we might see it rise a little bit with a storm, come back down, rise again, come back down, rise again. So again, this represents an average. I typically, when looking at data, I don't even necessarily see our lowest level, sometimes even until fall, depending upon how hard that winter was. It can take a very long time for road salt that's been spread during the winter time to thoroughly wash through the system. Stuff that gets trapped in storm drains, road salt that gets trapped in the environment and takes time to wash through. So just to keep that in mind, that where we can make reductions, it really actually does make a big difference. And we see this impacts especially on the natural environment that goes just beyond looking at these concentrations. I call out the top picture here on the left side of the screen. That is Phragmites. If you're not familiar with that giant reed, it is an invasive plant, and it is very salt tolerant, so it thrives in saltier soils. You will see this all along the highways, especially where salt has been overused for a significant amount of time. And kind of the thing with this is that it crowds out our native plants, crowds out native species, and it spreads like absolute wildfire. I'll call out the top picture here on the right side, and that is a salamander that was desiccated by salt in a parking lot. The story with this one is that this was at a forest preserve that is now doing much better things than they were before, but they treated for a frost in the springtime. The salamanders emerged, they crossed across that salty parking lot, and many of them were desiccated due to that salt use. So now that forest preserve has completely changed their practices. They're doing a much better job with it, but I caution with this is that we do see impacts to our natural environment that go just beyond our local waterways and that specific concentration. When I'm talking about that juvenile impacts, especially to our fish species, you'll see this picture here. This is actually from research out of Ohio that was done where they exposed those fish to those different chloride concentrations. Higher road salt, that fish didn't thrive as much, saw much smaller fish species, compared with the no road salt where the fish was able to thrive. So just to keep this in mind is that we do see impacts to our natural environment. And as we talk about both the built and natural environment, our landscaping and vegetation, that is really that bridge and that gap between the two. And so this is not snow, that is salt that was dumped on the side of a parking lot at the end of a season. And over time, that grass still has not come back. This is 18 months later. One of my coworkers who took these series of pictures still every so often goes back out there and checks on that. That spot still isn't growing anything. So just keeping in mind that we do see these damage between our landscaping and our vegetation, and this is kind of that gap between that built environment. The costs related to repairing landscaping can be significant, and so it is just something to keep in mind, especially as we're trying to talk about salt reduction. And then you think about the corrosivity of salt. I know everyone here probably understands that you have to wash your cars throughout the winter, keep the salt off of them, prevent that damage. But it goes a little bit beyond that elsewhere into our built environment. Thinking about the cost related to road infrastructure and bridges, as well as to concrete sidewalks, awning supports, your infrastructure around your communities like trash cans, light posts, interior floor damage, even from that salt being tracked in, to handrails. And even into, this is a sliding glass door. That salt gets into that sliding glass door and damages those metal bearings. That's expensive to replace. I don't want to know how expensive that gets. But thinking about where this damage comes from and where we can help you find your why, so what might be most important to you. And we start thinking about that true cost of salt, especially when we talk to our property managers, when we talk to our public works staff, when we think about what that true cost really looks like. You have that piece that's important, that for safety, that snow and ice management. But then you have that result of that salt use, that damage to those landscape repairs, the janitorial cost, repairs to your building, to your infrastructure. And we start thinking about what that total management cost is. And then you start tacking in these other expenses, like the expensive wastewater treatment plant upgrades to meet new permit requirements. You start tacking in the expense to replace that damaged bridge, the infrastructure cost. And you start adding in those costs to the environment, and this cost can absolutely add up quite quickly. There was a study done in Minnesota about the cost, adjusting their original study for current inflation, looking at least $1,700 to $17,000 for every ton used of road salt. And now to put that in perspective, we use a lot of road salt every year. So to think about sort of where these costs kind of come from and kind of expand into other pieces, there's a lot of ways that we can make adjustments to our operations to reduce salt use. And when we talk to our public works folks, I always hear this from somebody, at least one person says it, but this is the way we've always done it. And I like to show this picture of the horse-drawn snow roller. Technology moves forward. We're not using these horse-drawn snow rollers to deal with snow and ice management anymore. We have nice fancy plow trucks. You're not carrying around that nice giant brick of a cell phone anymore. We have smartphones now. So technology, it moves forward. Whenever you're ready to, let's say, upgrade your car, you're not going out to buy that Model T, you're going out to buy the next best model that you can afford. And so thinking about it from that perspective of technology moves forward, we have industry accepted best practices now to deal with snow and ice. I like to think about these practices as spokes on a wheel. The more of these practices that you use, the stronger your program becomes. The more salt reduction you're able to achieve, the better your ultimate end goal is going to get to. Everyone has a role to play, regardless of what your role might be. You might be just a person that is not involved in winter operations, but you use the roads during the winter time. You might be someone that is a public works professional who is out there during the wintertime managing snow and ice. And so something just to keep in mind is that regardless of what your role is, we all have a role to play and can all reduce the impact of our road salt. Many of our communities all have snow and ice plans, for example. And that guides their operations, guides their decision making. Our salt smart communities, they use plows as their primary tool to clear roads. You might at home use a snowblower, a shovel. Our parking lots crews, they might be using the right tool for the job of the right size snow pusher, for example, in their parking lots. But they're prioritizing plowing, especially when it gets really, really stinking cold, like we had with this last winter storm. And equipment calibration. This is one of the easiest things that folks can do as a first step. It doesn't cost money, you just need staff to do this. But it is dialing in their equipment, getting it set up so that they understand when they're setting it to say, for example, 300 pounds per lane mile, it's actually going to give them 300 pounds per lane mile. With this picture here, this is actually a story from a community in Wisconsin where they set their trucks, they hadn't calibrated before. They ran them before calibration to see what they were spreading. They thought they were setting it to 300 pounds per lane mile. Turns out they were spreading over 850 pounds, and one truck was spitting out over 900 pounds. So once they took that time to calibrate their equipment, dial it in, get it set up right, now when they asked it to spread 300 pounds per lane mile, it's actually spreading 300 pounds per lane mile, and for them, that was a huge salt savings right off the bat. Now they're able to follow application rate charts much easier because they know exactly what their trucks are spreading. Through the Salt Smart Collaborative, we have resources to help communities get started with this, like videos at the top of how to calibrate walk-behind spreaders, how to calibrate different types of equipment to help you get started with this. Pavement temperature and weather conditions really do guide decisions. When it gets really stinking cold, it takes time for salt to work. Regular road salt really isn't as effective below 15 degrees. It takes a long time to see the desired results that we want out of it. And so pavement temperature is really important for guiding these decisions. Our salt smart communities, they use different methods to measure that pavement temperature. Some of them might use those handheld temperature guns, which work really well. They might use the truck-mounted systems, also work really well. We have communities that even use pole-mounted systems that can help them with even with friction data getting out of that. So there's a lot of these cool resources that exist that can really help communities kind of follow these pavement temperature charts to help them guide their decision making. Pavement temperature is also really important for choosing the materials that they might use. They're choosing that right material for the right conditions and applying it at the right time. Different materials work better at different temperatures. So you might treat that road salt with calcium chloride when it gets really stinking cold to see that better performance, whereas you might be able to then get away with dry rocks or with rock salt treated with brine at warmer temperatures. So there are conditions where different things work differently. It also varies for application rates and also choosing what other winter maintenance strategies might be most effective. And when bare pavement is the target, liquid de-icers can really help us get there faster. It might be pre-treating, let me see if this goes. All right, it might be pre-treating the surfaces with brine before the storm. With this, like kind of this video I've got here of this truck going by spraying brine ahead of the storm. This prevents the bond for that snow from forming to the pavement. I put this in perspective for folks like you're frying eggs in a frying pan. You're going to put down that butter or that oil into that frying pan to actually help to kind of keep that food from sticking, just like you would with applying brine ahead of the storm for anti-icing. I'm less of a fan of the term of anti-icing just because it gets confusing for folks, but it's essentially you're pre-treating that surface with that liquid ahead of the storm. We see folks using liquids to get that dry rock salt wet. There was a study done out of Michigan, and this is a very old study, but I love that it's still practical today, where they got that salt wet, they tested spinner speed, they tested truck speed, and they measured the bounce and scatter of road salt across these different variables. And especially when they got that dry rock salt wet, they saw that there was a 30% reduction in the amount of road salt that actually was bouncing and scattering off that pavement surface. This alone can make a huge difference in keeping that rock salt where we want it to go for safe surfaces, and that means that the application rates can now be turned down a little bit, which is awesome to see. We also see more and more communities and private contractors turning to using liquid as a de-icer both during and after the storm. Liquids are really the rock star materials of winter maintenance because that salt is pre-dissolved as brine, because that liquid de-icer is ready to go. It's kind of, as one of our contractors put it, it's in an immediate state of melting. It's ready to be used and it can start activating a little bit faster. This means we start seeing safe surfaces just a little bit quicker. And so it's kind of neat to see that we have these tools at our disposal to really help to reduce the amount of rock salt that we're actually using. When you're using brine, less salt overall is needed. I've seen communities go anywhere from salt reduction with starting to implement liquids anywhere from 30% if they're just starting with anti-icing, all the way up to 50, 60, 70% if they go full in, which is a significant salt savings for them, both on a cost, but also a significant amount of salt that's not making it into the environment. And inevitably, I always get the question, so what about beet juice? I'm gonna poll the audience, because this is always fun to see how folks answer this question. We're gonna do a poll starting with the folks that think this is a myth, but beet juice is an alternative to road salt. How many folks think that is a myth? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 5 or 6, 7. Is it a fact? How many folks think that's a fact? Got a couple more hands raised significantly. All right, this is a myth. Beet juice itself is not an alternative to road salt. it is actually an additive. These sugars in beet juice, it's a carbohydrate-based product. The sugars in beet juice really help that road salt stick to that pavement surface. It also helps to improve that cold weather performance. I sort of put this in perspective for folks of thinking about you have a diet can of Coke in the freezer versus a regular can of Coke in the freezer. That regular can of Coke, it's gonna stay slushier longer than that diet can of Coke that doesn't have that sugar in it. So we see there's a performance benefit with this from the cold weather perspective. It's not a true alternative. It doesn't melt road salt on its own or melt salt on its own. But I always caution communities with this. Some folks really like to use this and find really good results with it. Others are less fans of it due to other reasons, like it might foam because it is an organic product. We have had some communities that really had to step up their communication game when it came to using beet juice because the questions that they were getting back from their communities because of the color and the smell that it might have. They were getting questions like, is this safe for my pets? Is this gluten-free? Does this have an environmental impact? So thinking about they did have to step up their communication game around it. And so I always caution with that is that if you do choose to use it, it can be a really good tool to do, but also you might need that communication to go along with it. A next big step is properly storing materials. Protecting that investment in your materials is huge. Protecting that from wind, rain, washing that away. We have a contractor who calls this theft by Mother Nature. So thinking about instead of, he's protecting that investment in his materials by keeping it covered. It's also part of the MS4 permit to have cover for your road salt. So I encourage you to say there's a lot of great ways you can do this. There's that salt dome using the tarp set up here for this larger pile, as well as using roll-off containers or storage tanks at satellite locations for our contractors. You will see that as well, which is pretty awesome. And we don't want to see salt piles that look like this, where it is open and it is literally right next to your storm drain washing right into it. So this is one of those pieces where this is not good storage. And you as a community, I'm going to talk a little bit too about kind of where you might have some opportunities to take a next step with this of preventing that road salt from washing down into that storm drain in your community. We also do a lot of training for winter staff. This is one of the biggest pieces of getting buy-in for staff that are doing this work, is to educate them on these good practices, let them learn from other communities' experiences to see how good what these practices can do and how they can benefit them. We do these workshops. We did 9 last year. We trained over 1,300 public works staff across our roads workshops, but also including our parking lots and sidewalk staff as well with that across all the park districts, school districts, private contractors that attended those workshops. I know McHenry County does their own as well with their sensible salting workshops. So there's a lot of opportunity here to get training for your staff. So regardless of what your role might be, please encourage your communities to send staff to training to come learn about these good practices. This last year, we did calibration workshops with, in conjunction with our Lake County DOT, DuPage County DOT, Cook County DOTH, their Department of Highways and Transportation, and we opened up time slots to have staff come and actually get dedicated time with trainers. This was a huge success. Staff came in, they learned how to calibrate their equipment, get that dialed in, get that set up, so that they could take that then back to their trucks elsewhere. They brought their own equipment, so they were learning on their equipment. This was a huge success for this program. We had all of our time slots filled, and we had staff that were trying to show up with trucks that did not sign up. Because people were excited about this. So it was exciting to have this program here. And so this is a piece kind of for those of you that might be MS4s especially, is that we have these good housekeeping workshops, we have these workshops here. This can help you meet your good housekeeping requirements for your MS4. As well as good communication is key. It really does help make a big difference in supporting your winter operations. I'll talk briefly about it, but because I'll talk about it again in a second, but there's the Salt Smart and You exhibit out in the lobby. Go check that out. I did bring that with us. But we have a variety of outreach resources to help you communicate with your communities. Whether that be you might be putting a banner up on your website, whether that be you might be using your local signage to help you do this, whether this be you might be posting on your social media pages. We have ways to help you with this that you can take advantage of as well, but really good communication help gets that buy-in. I will say the biggest challenge for communities to make the salt reduction is absolutely the public perception that we need to have crunchy surfaces for safe surfaces, which is really not necessarily the case anymore with all of these new good industry accepted best practices that really help to reduce the amount of road salt while still providing safe surfaces. So with this in mind, additional steps that you as a community can take. So salt storage in parking lots. Those salt piles, again, like I said, they're draining right in there. Where possible, this is such low-hanging fruit and easy to tackle, is to encourage covered salt storage and encourage them to store it away from storm drains and remove those salt piles in the spring. I haven't seen any ordinances around this yet, but I would love to see if someone tackled that because it is a really low-hanging fruit, quite simple to encourage that out of your community. Yes, salt piles are needed. It might be for safer surfaces, easier access for those contractors, but they don't need to be hanging out all the way into May when we really don't see snow and ice. As well as encourage annual training for contractors working in your communities. We offer our Salt Smart program, but there are other training programs throughout the country that are available out there for contractors. So I really encourage you to help get your contractors involved in this as well, wherever you can. We have a lot of resources for you that can really help support your MS4 program, especially around the public education outreach and public participation and involvement. So I want to talk about what some of these education and outreach materials that we have. Salt Smart is always available for presentations within your community if that's something you're interested in, as well as we have a citizen science public participation program, the Winter Chloride Watchers program, and I'll briefly talk about that as well. So we have a ton of outreach resources available on the Salt Smart website. We have posters, we have social media graphics, we have videos, we have blog posts, which are also fantastic for your newsletters. And we have the Salt Smart and You exhibit, as well as outreach materials that are handouts and things that are for you. I want to quickly, let me see if this will work. Let's see if I can show this. On our Salt Smart website page, up under the resources, ooh, nope, that didn't go. Under the resources tab up here, you'll see the outreach materials. We have a ton of these resources available to you. So different videos, all available on our website that you're welcome to share from, as well as a variety of posters. And we also have many of these materials available in Spanish, which I'll also kind of give you an idea of what some of those materials look like as well. A lot of these can be minimally customized. Like if you're interested, we can add your logos to them as well if you want to share them. All of these are available to you. All I want to know is that you use them so that we can kind of point and we can say, hey, look at what this cool community is doing to share our resources out. So I encourage you to do that. We have a ton of graphics, bookmarks, cups, and other resources. You're welcome to take advantage of this. The Salt Smart and You exhibit is an 8-panel exhibit. It is in English and Spanish, so one side English, one side Spanish. It is a great opportunity for you to share with your local libraries, put it up in your municipal center, community centers, events, public works open houses even. And it is available for you to borrow and reserve it. I just ask you keep it for no more than 4 weeks so that we can pass it around to other communities. There are 2 sets of it, so I can kind of spread it out as best we can. I have seen communities put it up all together. I've seen communities spread it out across their municipal building. In this situation here in Park Forest, they put it out across the 2 floors that their public typically go through in their municipal building based on where their different offices for the public are. We had one community last year spread it out to all of their different municipal buildings across their community, like their library, their village center, I think it was, they put it at one of their rec centers. They put it at the high school as well, which I thought was kind of cool and creative. I called that scavenger hunt style. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get creative with this. I encourage you to check it out if it's something you're interested in and interested in using. We have a variety of handouts for residents. I also brought some of these as examples with me, so I put them up at the front desk this morning. Our salt scatter cups, this single cup is enough for 10 sidewalk squares. It's about 10 to 12 ounces in size, and that's all you need for a single, about 10 sidewalk squares. And really when you're thinking about spreading this, It's about spreading where you need it, not necessarily just widely just taking that bag and dumping and go. So we have materials available to you if you're at all interested. These materials are also available in Spanish, so our bookmark isn't double-sided, comes in Spanish as well. We have posters that are available in Spanish as well as some of our social media graphics. So if that's important to you, which I know some communities do find that to be important, to be able to communicate with all their community members, we have that opportunity available to you. You can also share directly from social media. And I will sound like an influencer here, but please like, subscribe, and share. I know that some of you have awesome communication departments that are probably very active on social media and active on sharing your outreach materials, and some of you may not. So we always post all of our materials onto our Salt Smart social media so that they're easy for you to share back to your own pages if you want to do so. So please take advantage of this. We're also trying to get out a lot of new reels onto the social media pages as well. So I'm going to see if this will play. This is our
We
new
are a
reels
Salt Smart
here.
community.
Ready for whatever winter brings.
We check the forecasts and we prepare the plows.
While we're different towns,
we're all working together to make the road safe this winter.
Our roads connect. Safe roads don't stop at the city limits.
It takes all of us.
Different towns, one mission.
Safe roads.
So we try to get all these materials out. We're doing a lot more reels to, again, help engage more folks. And I actively encourage you to check all of our social media materials out. And again, like, subscribe, and please share. From a public participation and involvement perspective, we have the Winter Chloride Watchers program. We partnered with Illinois River Watch to do this program. This quite literally popped in my lap through a cold email into my inbox from Danielle with the Illinois River Watch program. She basically said, hey, you should check this out. I went to one of her trainings, participated 1 year, and brought it back TCF and said, how can we make this happen? It is an awesome program for volunteers to collect and report chloride results back to us November through May. They get a test kit. They get a training class that they participate in that's about an hour long. I'm happy to come bring that training to you if that's something you're interested in. We just ask that you get about 15 folks to come to that class. We talk a lot about what these good practices are, as well as what the issue with chlorides are. So they're getting that education about what this is as an environmental issue, but also get that education about the good things you as a community are doing to help reduce the amount of road salt, help get more buy-in from your community members. So as you can see, this is a kind of two maps of this program. We started the program about 23, so this was our first year participating. Prior to that, they had about 50 to 60-ish sites here in Northeast Illinois. We bumped that up pretty significantly in our first year to 173. And then last year, we got a huge swing of volunteers. We ended at about 296 sites here in Northeast Illinois. So have definitely boosted the participation in this program, but it is available to anyone across the state as well. So last year alone, we had 149 volunteers across Illinois, or 179 volunteers across Illinois reporting our results back. These are the maps of those sites that were active last year, with 1,480 chloride results reported back to us, which is pretty neat, at 261 active sites. We send out monthly reminder emails to our volunteers to continually engage them on the chloride issue. So they get a reminder, hey, it's time to go collect your sample, but I always try to include some education around the chloride issue. So like this last month, for January, I sent out the reminder email with information about Winter Salt Awareness Week. So if you're not aware, this week is Winter Salt Awareness Week. So sent out some email with some information about that, of how those folks can get involved and participate in that as well. So we try to help to keep this as an educational tool. We're not trying to use this to point fingers at anyone for saying, hey, look, you're using too much salt. Instead, we want this as an educational tool for our community members to have a better understanding of the hard work that our public works folks are putting in and what kind of things they're doing to help reduce salt use. So lastly, I'm going to kind of close this out with how you can be salt smart in your community and at home. So things that, again, you can do to help be salt smart, not just your public works folks. This is, again, another good example of one of our outreach materials. It is 10 tips to help us winter together. So we're trying to, again, get outreach materials that are helping to educate out. But the big thing about at home is getting ready for winter, identifying and fixing problem areas, rerouting gutters so that they're away from sidewalks and driveways so that you're not inadvertently creating hazardous conditions where you need to, again, over-apply the salt, like in this situation where you maybe a little hard to see with the lighting, but those are 2 drainage spouts up at the top, and that sidewalk gets oversalted every winter. So it's making sure to clear storm drains of debris, identifying and fixing uneven surfaces, kind of helping to clear stuff out, get ready for winter. And then, like I shared before, clear snow first, and then apply salt only if you need it. So if you can achieve a safe surface with, say, a broom, a snow blower, this last snowstorm with the light fluffy snow that we had, I saw many of my neighbors out there with leaf blowers. So there's a lot of different ways that you can clear snow for safe surfaces that do not involve salt. And if you can achieve that without salt, fantastic. And then, but if you do need it, think about where you actually need it. If you have a sidewalk that you use pretty frequently, like say the sidewalk from our street to my house, we might put a little bit of salt there if we get some icy patches. But we have a sidewalk that runs along the side of our house that we don't use, so we don't salt that. We'll still shovel it, but we don't salt that. So it's thinking about where you need it, and not necessarily just if you need it. And I will say that I do really actually like talking about sand when we get to these kind of steps here, because sand on sidewalks can be a really good tool. Just sweep it up at the end when you do clean it up, because that does make a big difference. And then after that snow melts, after you've cleared that sidewalk, sweep up any leftover salt. I call out this picture specifically, this nice big one here with all that salt. And there's almost no snow along that sidewalk. There's no reason to have that much salt out at that point in time. You can already see the damage that is being caused along that sidewalk from that oversalting. So encourage you to sweep it up. Use it for that next storm. It's still good. It still works. That can be a big way to save on salt as well. And then help your plow truck drivers do their jobs better. Don't crowd the plow. I always encourage folks, don't pass the plow. It's way better behind the plow than it is ever going to be in front of that plow truck. Avoid that second shovel. Make sure you clear some space out so you don't have to redo your driveway again. Help first responders clear around fire hydrants if you do get a big snowstorm. Build in that extra time. And then one big thing we hear from a lot of our communities is help us get to your streets faster. So keep those streets clear for snow plows. If you can, park off the street on a snow day. If you can, follow your ordinances related to that snow. But if you have snow on trash day, keep those trash cans, if you have alley collection, keep those trash cans clear for the garbage collectors. But if you bring it out to the curb, put that behind the curb line so it's still able to be collected. But your snowplow operators aren't playing dodgems with the garbage cans out in the street. So that really does help them get to their job faster, helps them clear roads quicker, so help them do their jobs a little bit faster. And lastly, think about who clears snow at work or your apartment or your HOA. Help encourage your local contractors to do good things. Review your levels of service. Ask, does it really need to be the same everywhere? Like I shared with that example with the side of the house. Remember that you may not need salt everywhere to have that safe surface. And include these practices like liquids, industry accepted best practices in those RFPs, in your contracts, in your requests, and ask for it. The neat thing that I see, especially when we go to industry shows, when we go talk at places with our contractors, is that we see the equipment is being designed at their level for liquids. And that's awesome to see. And if it wasn't being designed if they weren't using liquids, they wouldn't be designing equipment for them for that. So ask about it, because it works and it's a really neat tool to help you achieve safe surfaces. We have resources like the Property Manager's Guide from SaltSmart, which gives a pretty good understanding for our local property managers on what these good practices are to ask for. It's a condensed version of the Illinois Winter Maintenance Manual for parking lots and sidewalks, which is also available at the SaltSmart website. So if there are questions, I'm happy to take them, or you're always welcome to reach out to me later, and always welcome to check out that SaltSmart website as well. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. I see that there's a broad range of disciplines and professional backgrounds, public sector, private sector. Hopefully the things that I'll share with you this morning, some of you may be very familiar already with some of these ecological systems, functions, and so on and so forth. Others, it may be a little bit more new. If you're very familiar, bear with me. Hopefully I'll still give you something or share something that may be of interest. Just a little bit of background. For 25 years, I served as founder president of Conservation Design Forum, which was environmental planning, design, engineering, science, consulting firm here in the Chicago area, made up of landscape architects, planners, botanists, biologists, ecologists, and civil water resource engineers. A great deal of our work focused on urban water-based green infrastructure systems, of which I'm going to share, hopefully if I have time, a whole bunch of different kinds of projects, because there really is nowhere that a thoroughly designed and integrated green infrastructure development can't benefit not only the environment, water, air, climate, but where it also really helps, money. A well-designed project, you can put green infrastructure anywhere and save money on development projects, period. And I'll share some of those examples with you. Again, I apologize because I always try to put too much into a program and it's going to go fast and furious. So why is green infrastructure important in the first place? Well, at CDF, our mission was to restore the earth and inspire ecological stewardship. Education outreach is a big part of what we did. Research is a big part of what we did. We founded Conservation Research Institute. We founded Conservation Land Stewardship, so we were actively involved in research. We were actively involved in construction, ecological restoration and management, long-term stewardship. But it all begins with wherever you are, and believe me, every place on the surface of the earth, every acre is unique unto itself, but it's beginning with a deep appreciation of the historical, physical, and cultural processes that shaped North American ecosystems where we live here. Cultural, from that perspective, this is a very lived-in land. Native people have lived here for thousands and thousands of years before we ever showed up in very purposeful ways, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So what we refer to today as nature co-evolved in purposeful ways with human beings. And so part of our mission is educational outreach that helps us appreciate that we have kind of gotten away from an understanding of how these systems work. As a general population, many of you probably have a much better understanding than most, to the point where, as David Orr, who was for a long time the chair of the Department of Environmental Studies at Oberlin College, and very famous author and educator, wrote many books, but one of the papers that he wrote was called Educating for the Environment. And in that paper, he made a statement that we are a society of people today that must be educated back into existence. And I agree. In fact, I don't mean to offend people when I say this, because I don't mean that we're stupid people. We're not stupid people. But we are a society of people today that is so fundamentally ignorant of the basic processes of the earth that only we could claim that human beings have absolutely no influence on weather and climate. I don't mean ignorant from the perspective of stupidity. I mean ignorant from the perspective of a complete disconnect, a complete lack of understanding of how these systems functioned historically and the relationships to which humans had in the evolution of what we refer to as nature. These are the processes, the connections that we desperately must restore. And it's all possible. In fact, it's cool, it's fun, it's beautiful, and enriching. So, as A.O. Wilson once said, nature holds the key to our aesthetic, intellectual, cognitive, and even spiritual satisfaction. It makes us feel good. So, here we are, we live in northeastern Illinois, right in the heart of the old tall grass prairie ecosystems, or our open-grown, far-reaching savanna woodland systems. That's pretty much what was the dominant ecosystems around where we live. And if you look at tall grass prairie ecosystems, how they evolved, basically we're looking at a 90% of the plant mass below ground in a root architecture that annually composed about 12 to 15,000 pounds of root mass per acre. Every year, about a third of that root system would die off and start to regrow in the next year's annual cycle. But every year, when you have this much of your plant mass below ground, you're accumulating net amounts of soil organic carbon. Here, around probably, as we're a little moister area in the eastern part of the tall grass, probably 1 to 2 tons on average of soil organic carbon accumulation annually. That cycle, for hundreds and hundreds of years, built the richest topsoil in the world. Absolutely the richest topsoil in the world. Now, think about when you have a massive system covering the earth, a living landscape, living tissue. What happens when it rained? Well, basically 3 things happened when it rained around here, because most of our rainfall events occurred in intensities of less than 1 inch over a 24-hour period. That's just sucked right up as fast as it can come out of the sky. We did a bunch of research with the NRCS back in the late 90s and documented the unbelievable infiltration capacity of historic systems as well as reconstructed systems when they were built and stewarded properly. And of course, that goes right back up into the atmosphere. And then what happens every night, because this is really important, it comes back again through condensation. And then it goes back up again. And that whole region is kept cool, very stable moisture levels, very stable temperature levels throughout the growing season. That's something that we have to think about. That we can design through green infrastructure systems to replicate that kind of stability. As you get more free water moving, now you're influenced by the underlying soil structure, the topography, and you start to get shallow groundwater moving down gradient, and eventually across the whole of the landscape, you get infiltration and aquifer recharge. So that's pretty much how it worked. It didn't include surface water runoff. Pretty much no matter how hard it rained during the growing season. The only time of year where we would get runoff around these part of the world is coming up real soon in spring snowmelt. And then that would tend to run off the surface, pond in the low-lying aquatic areas, our streams, our lakes, our rivers, and our wetlands, until it's soaked into the ground or evaporated into the atmosphere. And then after that, flooding, as we've become accustomed to it today, right up through the whole heart of the summer, didn't exist. Impossible to have existed in a historical Illinois landscape system. So, here's how it worked. The whole of the landscape absorbed its water. A lot of it went back into the atmosphere through evapotranspiration. But it may take days, months, or years for that water to manifest itself, because it's now moving through groundwater as a seep and a spring to create a stream and a river or a lake. All of our aquatic systems and our wetlands were formed by either direct rainfall or primarily by constant, steady, stable discharge 365 days a year from a groundwater table system that only 4 feet down stays 54 to 55 degrees year-round. So you can go across the river to Bluff Springs Fen today, and you'll see those seeps and that water gurgling through there, coming out of the ground, just like it has every single day of the year. Now, just to give you a quick background on me. I'm a landscape architect and with degrees in undergraduate and graduate degrees in landscape architecture, but very focused on environmental design, environmental planning. And I went to work when I got out of school at Iowa State for the Story County Conservation Board, and I was the landscape architect planner for the county, and I worked with a whole team of botanists, ecologists, foresters. I was the only non-science guy, if you will. Boy, did I learn a lot from them. I learned that multidisciplinary teamwork is the only way to do really cool stuff that actually works. And that became the foundation of Conservation Design Forum when I finally founded it in 1994. But because we worked in Story County, we worked on all kinds of prairie, de novo prairie restorations and woodland restoration, wetland creation and restoration. So I had that kind of experience for about 6 years before I moved to Michigan and eventually went to work for Johnson, Johnson and Roy, which was a big national planning firm. And at that time, this is in the late 80s, Michigan had a State Wetland Protection Act since 1978 that required any impacts to wetland systems be mitigated. It could be as small as this little area right here and be an old cornfield that doesn't have any functions or values other than that, but you'd have to mitigate it. So I spent 7 years working with them in their new environmental services studio, where they kind of expanded into a more multidisciplinary organization. And we were doing all kinds of wetland mitigation design, construction, ongoing monitoring. I'd have to go out every year, and we would spend a lot of time and effort. You know, of course, they were building. We did a lot of work for Myers. They build these big greenfield Myers development projects, and we take all the stormwater and we run it through vegetated swales, and then eventually get back into this kind of big circular sort of, thing where we would plant tubers and rootstocks and create submergent and emergent and then shallow and then all native vegetation, spending a lot of time and effort and money to create these recreated habitats, and they look pretty cool. But one of the things that I found doing the annual monitoring was the first year, if we planted these plants, natives now, in tubers and rootstocks, boom, man, they grow up. They look fantastic, especially in the emergent zones. And along the edges, when we're planting by seed, it'd take a little bit longer. Come back the first year, looks good. Come back the second year, starting to kind of transform a little bit. Come back the third year, most of the stuff that we planted was now gone, and it was replaced by what I refer to as the usual suspects. That would be cattails, reed canary grass, phragmites, and purple loosestrife. And at that time, purple loosestrife was rampant in the Detroit metro area. It hadn't gotten quite over here yet, but it did. All, non-native or terribly invasive species. And so it was very frustrating to me. Well, one of the things that happened when I was still living in Ann Arbor, I met Gerald Wilhelm. Now, do most of you know who Jerry Wilhelm is? Okay, so Jerry was a botanist and ecologist, research taxonomist with Morton Arboretum, and had written the book Plants of the Chicago Region with Floyd Swink. The third edition and then the fourth edition, and he was a world famous botanist and ecologist. And he came over. He did a lecture at Michigan, and then we came over with a group of us from my colleagues at JJR, and met with Jerry out in the field. And we spent 2 days just roaming around with him at restoration sites and talking about all kinds of stuff. And it was really fun and informative. But then that fall in 1990. I came over and helped open a JJR Chicago office. My first call was to Jerry Wilhelm. And I said, hey, Jerry, you remember me? We've met a couple of times now. We are doing some pretty cool stuff in ecological restoration, and I'd love to meet with you and see if we could collaborate. And he's like, okay, yeah, I'm pretty busy. How about January? And this was October. And I'll wait, So I met with Jerry over lunch in January of 1991. And it changed my life in one lunch. I mean, profoundly. Because now, again, background in civil water resource engineering, collect, convey, discharge. Maybe we can clean it along the way. But wetlands are for two reasons: flood, storage, and cleansing, like the big kidney. We dump all of our polluted crap into them and expect them to clean it all up. That's what they're for. Now, that said, you can design created wetland systems designed specifically for waste treatment. That's different. than to imply that our actual remnant ecosystems, best functions and values of wetlands are for stormwater storage and water cleansing. So I was explaining to Jerry my frustrations about, hey, you know, we plant all these things, we put them in the right habitats, and then they just disappear. And he sat there very politely, listening to me. Didn't want to hurt my feelings. Didn't know me that well. We worked together for 25 years as business partners. He didn't have any problem with that later, let me tell you. But I kid the Jerry. At any rate, he said, well, Jim, you broke the law. I said, what do you mean I broke the law? I didn't break any law. I said, I followed the design guidelines from the NRCS, from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, or the Corps of Engineers, from the Michigan DNR, right to the T's. He laughed and he said, that's not the law I'm talking about. He said, you broke a real law, not the other ones that are all written laws. They're nice, but this is a law that you really broke. You broke the law of habitats and plants. You see, plant species are grow in habitats to which they're adapted. And if that's true, which of course it was, he says if you change the habitat, you will most certainly change the habitats, or the inhabitants, excuse me. And I'm like, okay. And he said, well, rather than let's, hear me talk about it, although we did that day, we went out shortly thereafter to Bluff Springs Fen. And we're wandering around, and this was in the early spring when things were really starting to blossom and it was looking really cool. And we're walking through there. Now, I had already absorbed this by that time, but this just reinforced my understanding. So we're walking through the fen, and there's just water gurgling out of the ground, the formation of little streams. He's spewing off Latin like a crazy man. Literally a who's who of Illinois threatened and endangered plant species and the aquatic organisms that live in that little stretch of stream corridor. And he said, Jim, there's about 1,000 native plants in each one of our counties around here. And out of those 1,000 native plants, about half of them are adapted to some type of a wetland habitat that we would have had historically present here. And he said, you understand now that our wetland and aquatic systems were formed and sustained by groundwater discharge, not by dump on top through surface water runoff. And I said, yeah. And he said, come on, let's walk on down the line a little bit here. So we went down to the end of the trail back where you go to the parking lot. If you've all been over there, if you're not, you need to go. That's where all the wisdom of nature actually exists around here. Not all, there's other places, but that's one of them. Anyway, we get down to the end, and he looks out towards Poplar Creek, which is just one massive hunk of cattails and other crap. And he turned around to me and he says, now that you understand the habitats to which our native plants are adapted, how many of our 500 native wetland plants have a long-term ancient genetic history of growing in a habitat constantly influenced by dirty, polluted surface water runoff every single time it rains, and carrying with it pesticides, herbicides, salt, and all the other good things that we put on top of our urban, suburban, and rural habitats. And I looked at him and I said, not many? And he said, none. There isn't one single Illinois native wetland plant that has any genetic history of growing in filth and instability, because every time it rains. But every time it rains in the Poplar Creek corridor, it floods up, and the equivalent of about the 1 year, 24-hour storm event is when all biodiversity and stability collapses and becomes the usual suspects. And it was like the lightning bolt hit me on the side of the head. I said, I will never spend another day in my life, at least not trying to understand how we can design anywhere in urban, suburban, and rural environments to replicate these functions of water and soil and so on and so forth. And eventually I left JJR and founded Conservation Design Forum because I had to put the team together, and we did. Jerry Wilhelm, David Yaka, Tom Price came over from NIPSI. We had all the key pieces that we need to start trying to design and research green infrastructure systems. And we did. So when you look at Bluff Spring Fin, you see there they are, 360. We're out there. I've got pictures from all over the time. It's just such a beautiful place, such stability. And then you get down to the end by Poplar Creek, and there's what we're dealing with. And you can, like I said, you can draw that line of systems collapse right around the 1 year, 24-hour storm event. And I told Jerry, I said, I spent, a fair amount of time being trained that we collect the water, we try to treat it okay, and then we dump it into these places because that's what their functions and values are. And he said, yeah, Jim, that's exactly why we have hardly any actual remnant ecosystems or even built de novo ecosystems that have any functions or values really left. That's why we've destroyed most of them. You see, the paradigm that we have today is, and this is the unfortunate legacy of our contemporary urban, suburban, and rural environments, is that water is a waste product. It is to be unceremoniously sent away just as quickly and efficiently as the law will allow, often leaving us bereft and somewhere else overwhelmed by it. And so, because we have so dramatically altered the surfaces of the earth, we no longer have the ability to absorb water. We no longer have organic soils. We have hot mineral soils that have been extremely disrupted, and everything runs off of those, carrying whatever resources are left. And that's how we're trained to do it. So, as I mentioned, convection and collection and conveyance. That's the design tool. Now, we often incorporate holes in the ground to temporarily detain the water. We have our dry bottom holes in the ground. We have our wet bottom holes in the ground. But when you take a whole bunch of your water from a whole bunch of your impervious developed site, including turf grass lawns, and shunt it directly into those systems are very unstable. The water quality is terrible. I'm not saying you can't have water features. They can be a beautiful part of an integrated solution, but this is not the way to go. Now, we like to put fences around them, because we don't want anybody wandering into the mosquito-laden, polluted, crappy, nasty environment that we've created for ourselves. No trespassing, and if we have a really expensive piece of property, why? We dress up the fence. Yet, we give, anywhere from 15 to 25% of our developable land aside for a hole in the ground for the express purpose of collecting polluted water and sending it someplace else. Integrated green infrastructure can eliminate all of that. And the water quality, well, we all know about that. As the EPA estimates, 40 to 60% of nitrogen applies to lawns ends up in our surface and groundwater systems. And the flooding that becomes ever the more present. These floods of 2008, I'm going to show some more images of that. Then we end up with another problem. We have horrific erosion, stream bank and wetland bank erosion from all of this, massive flushes of water. And then, so to the point where we go from the hydrology of boom, and here's the other part of this problem, to the hydrology of bust. When you have no groundwater contributions that are constantly being sustained by your surface water infiltration, and you have all this water that's being passed out of the system, eventually a lot of streams, major rivers, are actually above the water table and can completely dry up in the summertime. It's just, the water table used to be up here. But our behavior has not been very good. So you can't continue to send 3/4 or more of your annual precipitation away in the form of a polluted surface water runoff element, dramatically reduce recharge while you continue to expand withdrawals from limited groundwater reserves and think you'll never run out of fresh water. Let me just say one thing based on that. If there is one of the most stupid, unsustainable forms of land use on earth, It is corn ethanol production. Now, I'm sorry if you grow, I came from a farm as a kid, but we didn't grow that kind of corn. The way we grow corn is unsustainable to start with. I'm not saying that we can't grow corn in a more sustainable manner. I think we could. But even if we grew corn or soybeans in the most utterly ecologically sustainable way, ethanol production would be utterly unsustainable the way it's done right now. Because it takes 3 to 4 gallons of highly purified fresh water coming from the ground to produce 1 gallon of stinky, crappy corn ethanol. But we think it's green. We celebrate our greenness in our ignorance and greed. Stupidity. I'm sorry, I can't help it. It just drives me crazy. And then we unleash all of that on our rivers and our streams and our wetlands that had tremendous biodiversity, extraordinary functions and values, and leave ourselves with this. So what happens when we completely till up our prairie soils? It doesn't take very long for that root system to go away. The organic matter oxidizes almost immediately into the atmosphere. Massive amounts of oxidation. I'm talking thousands of pounds of oxidation of organic matter that can occur. Increased soil runoff and erosion, compaction and loss of root structure, bulk density increases. We put in some tiles to get rid of some more water that undermines whatever groundwater we had left. And the crops need, or whatever, lawns, crops, whatever, need additional resources to just sustain. And whether it's our urban, our suburban, our rural, our agricultural, whatever it might be, or just left alone areas that no longer have human involvement like they did with fire and stewardship, they just collapse and fall apart. So, and I'm going to get to the green infrastructure here pretty quick. Yeah. Again, sorry for all of the stuff. I can't help myself. So when we lose that rhizosphere, which includes the deep-rooted systems of the native bunch grasses, we lose the contiguous connection to the stable thermal mass of the earth. Those root systems are tapped into that 54 to 55 degree temperature with water always moving through there, and they're bringing it back up and releasing it back into the atmosphere on a daily basis. I'll never forget, in the spring, summer, and fall of 1991, I went out to the Morton Arboretum to the Schulenburg Prairie about every 2 weeks to take pictures. I was in a project on a development, in a meeting for a development project we were working on, this was the week of July 4th that year. We hadn't had rain for 6 weeks. We got out of this, I was in Itasca Business Park up there. I got out of the meeting, I walked out towards my car, and I looked out over what was like dead and dying turf, and here's a group of geese out there walking around trying to find something that looks green to eat, you know. It was just crazy. And it was also about 93 degrees when I left at 11 o'clock that morning. It's a hot, nasty day. No rain for 6 weeks now. I jumped in my car. I said, hey, I got a chance. I'm going to get down to the Schulenburg, take a few pictures. So I park, got my camera. I walk in. You know, now in the prairie, you're out in the middle of bright sunshine. There's no trees when you're out in the middle of the Schulenburg. You just walk the trails. And so I'm walking around, I'm taking pictures of butterfly milkweed and all kinds of stuff in bloom. There's cup plants, interestingly enough, if you know the silphiums, the cup plants, they have the leaves that trap water. Now they trap water on a daily basis even if it hasn't rained because it condenses back down into there. So I'm walking along the edge and my pants are now getting sopping wet as it rubs up against the plant material. And then I see all kinds of little critters, bees and beetles and all sorts of things nibbling in the water in these cup plants. And I walk out into the middle of the prairie, and all of a sudden, there's a nice breeze. All of a sudden, it dawned on me, I felt completely comfortable. I wasn't hot at all. It was 90-some degrees. But this whole landscape was evapotranspiring and maintaining a cool environment, which, would have been that way historically as well. So that connection to the stable mass of the earth, very important. As the soil moisture decreases and the mineral soil gets hot, or other surfaces that become vulnerable to daily significant temperature fluxes, a lot of our organisms are ectotherms. So their body chemistry is actually maintained by the environments in which they live, whether it's a soil, terrestrial environment, or whether it's an aquatic environment. They can't exist in an environment that, and Jerry and Laura did the research on their new book. They were taking all kinds of temperature readings from places that had been disturbed to places that were actual remnants, that were still stable remnants. And you'd get like 120 some degrees in the first 6 inches in the middle of the afternoon, and then 50 something at night in the same place. It's just there's no habitat for native organisms because it's so unstable. So when we get to that point, we just default. The few plants and animals that can survive such circumstances, most natives are completely incapable. Evaporation and transpiration at the surface is now drastically altered or reduced, and the moderating effects of water and that landscape are lost, and the surface of the earth heats up. And guess what? The shifts in temperature and hydrology affect weather patterns, biodiversity, and yes, even global warming. Now, I've read even recently so many things about, global warming, climate change. That's one of the biggest hoax ever pulled on humanity. No, it's real, period. And we need to educate everybody. That's really the reason that in 2011, I had already met Ron Dutch, who's a really noted agronomist and regenerative agricultural specialist, used to be the executive director of the Michael Fields Institute up in East Troy, Wisconsin, and we worked with them through CDF on several projects, so I got to know him. And we were heavy at that point at CDF in developing all sorts of green infrastructure projects, primarily urban and suburban, all over the country. And, but I was driving from Iowa State, where I'd had a meeting, and I'm driving back through I-80, and it's in the middle of the summer, and I'm looking at all this frickin' corn, and it's hot. And I see water, where it hadn't rained for I don't know how many weeks. I see water weeping out of the tiles. And I said, that's it. So I called Ron up and I said, hey, Ron, because we'd been talking about also organizing a nonprofit to promote understanding, education, outreach, and actual regenerative agriculture. I said, we can't do it as a nonprofit. We need to do something as a for-profit company that proves that regenerative agriculture can be designed and implemented so that it creates more money at the farm gate with less risk, and everybody's got to like that and provide all these environmental benefits. And so we founded Solutions in the Land, and eventually, as I said, CDF got absorbed into this larger firm. I walked away. Ron and I are still working together. So, I mean, from the last kind of scientific thing that I'll share with you, you may be familiar with this little science, C. Hopkins Cafe. So it's basically how the world works. And if you don't have C. Hopkins Cafe, if you have nutrients that aren't available in the cafe closes up, breaks down. Take a look at today's urban, suburban, and rural world. C. Hopkins Cafe is gone, particularly in agricultural zones. So what's that mean? Well, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, potassium, iodine, nitrogen, sulfur, calcium, iron, and magnesium. These are the essential macro and micro elements of a living earth, a living tissue. And you know what? Well, I'll wait for a second. So carbon goes in the atmosphere, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, got to stay in the ground, potassium, iodine, nitrogen goes both ways, sulfur, calcium, iron, and magnesium. A living historical soil system contained billions of microorganisms per cubic foot. If you screw up the soil today and it's dead, it's just dirt, there's very little microbial life. C. Hopkins Cafe breaks down and the whole thing goes to crap. That's what we're dealing with. these microbial communities are absolutely essential to make all of these all of these elements actually work. Like solubilizing phosphorus that's in the soil. We have all the phosphorus we could ever use, but when you have a dead soil without microorganisms, there's nothing to solubilize that phosphorus and make it available. So living soil microbe communities, and we've been working with those, Ron has particularly for like 40 years now, you can recreate these systems and they explode when they have a healthy opportunity. So, and as they say, we are what we eat. Well, what we eat comes from the earth, whether it's a terrestrial eat or an aquatic eat. And so what is the human body made of? Well, if we are of the earth, we're exactly the same. We are absolutely exactly the same. So oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, and phosphorus are the 6 macro elements. And then potassium, sulfur, sodium, chlorine, and magnesium. In the human body, again, on the inside and outside, billions of microorganisms that work together. If we have those essential elements and those microorganisms working, we're healthy people. If we don't have them, and I would tell you that I'm no doctor, but I would bet a lot of our maladies today are caused by a system way out of that whack. So, and of course the importance of pollinators, 80% of crop production worldwide. One thing Jerry told me when he and Laura were out in the field doing research for 15 years, he said, Jim, I have never seen fields, edges of fields, in rows of fields, in my years of botany and field work where there were no weeds, zero weeds, zero weeds. They're just Roundup ready beans and corn. Pour it on, baby, pour it on. Yeah, we get a big yield of corn and beans and kill everything else. And when we kill everything else, we eventually kill ourselves too. So, pollinators, absolutely critical. Green infrastructure systems create all sorts of opportunities for pollinators. If you take that green infrastructure concept out into watershed scale agriculture, which is what we're doing, it creates super highways for pollinators. I remember doing a program a couple of years ago. A woman who lives not far outside of Bloomington Normal came up to me afterwards and she said, we live on a little farmhouse. We're completely surrounded by corn and soybeans, but I wanted to do something good for the environment. So I planted all of these pollinator plants in and around my gardens and everything else. And nobody showed up. Nobody showed up because they weren't there. They had no mechanism to be there. There was no way for them to get there. So this is something that green infrastructure systems, hugely important. And so begins with living systems, and the foundation is water. Water is the driver of life. Water drives success. Water drives failure. It sustains us or it disrupts us. And so that's what green infrastructure systems are really all around, all about. Never squander water as a waste product. Water for net zero waste. We can do that too. Make it visually accessible. We do that in a lot of our projects. We brought in artists and other people to work with us, and they, when people can see water and see that it's clean and beautiful in a design element in a project, it just reconnects you. And of course, zero surface water runoff. Everything's accommodated on site. I don't care how dense of a project, how urban of a project, or suburban, or whatever. You do not need that. So green infrastructures are essentially living ecologies cooperatively with technology to optimize the performance and the entire system restore soil health, balance of water and carbon cycling, energy systems, and nutrients locally. And so many different kinds of green infrastructure technologies. So green roof systems, porous pavement systems, bioretention, these are only some of them. Rainwater harvesting and reuse, big part of a lot of, kind of living building challenge and lead gold platinum projects these days. water recycling and reuse. Wastewater recycling is a huge part of this for energy, for soil nutrient, for soil amendments, lots of cool stuff there, integration of native landscapes. So all sorts of ways through intensive and extensive, intensive being the deeper garden tops for green roof systems, to shallow, lightweight, extensive green roof systems, all perform functions for water, temperature, moderation, and so on and so forth. Many can be designed to be, beautiful outdoor garden spaces. Green, porous pavement, and there's all different kinds of porous pavements. These are just some of the interlocking systems. You can design porous pavement. Well, as I mentioned earlier, if you design this right, you can eliminate the need for any kind of standard detention whatsoever. That allows a developer, if you're building in a, let's say an infill area or even in a greenfield area, to give up a big hunk of their site for all in the ground. You just integrate these solutions. You get green space, but the green space is now functional for you as part of your whole water, landscape, and other management system. Bioretention, lots of ways to integrate bioretention, including with the visible elements of water features, all part of the package. Tons of different ways to incorporate rainwater harvesting and reuse, from large cisterns like you see here on the left to, rain barrels at home. Biological wastewater treatment. We worked with John Todd on their living machine systems for many, many times over the years. It just eliminate the concept of waste. And of course, integration of living native landscape systems that have to be designed and managed stewardship properly, but they save you hundreds and thousands of dollars on maintenance costs on an annual basis. And I will say, as I mentioned, there's a restorative green infrastructure solution for any environment, starting at the top of Chicago City Hall, which we designed in the late 90s. Interesting thing about the City Hall project is that they started doing research there because it was an urban heat island initiative grant when we built it in the first place. And so we got funding, so we were trying to figure out ways to reduce that heat in these highly dense urban areas. And so after we built the rooftop gardens, we had the perfect test area, because if you know City Hall is on the west side of the square, and the county is on the east side of the square, so it's just one big square block. So we had a perfect way to research what the effects on temperature reduction on the vegetated side versus the other side of the roof. And of course, depending on where you have your intakes for your HVAC systems, this can be a big influence. So in the middle of, or early August of 2001, they measured the average temperature on a hot day. The average temperature on top of the vegetated side of the roof was right around the high 80s to the low 90s, which is pretty good. And then they went over to the to the county side of the building, which is your basic tar roof system. The average temperature from various collected points was 169. So you can imagine the cumulative effects over the course of a community that starts to integrate green infrastructure, like a lot of cities have in Germany. And this is actually, let me back up, and I'm going to run through these really fast because you'll see that there's just a whole bunch of different ways to do this. This is a corporate campus, Johnson Controls headquarters up in Glendale, Wisconsin, just north of Milwaukee. It involves everything that I've talked about here: green roof systems, rainwater harvesting and reuse for non-potable use in the buildings for all the toilets and so on and so forth. Energy production, visible water systems designed as part of the art element, but from collected rainwater, porous pavement, integrated bioretention, native landscape systems. And when you have a living campus like this, it invites all sorts of friends to stop by. You actually generate habitat for lots of different kinds of organisms, including insects, butterflies, and obviously wild turkeys. A little closer, actually very close to here, was the AMCOL headquarters, which had a couple of other interesting features. AMCOL was a minerals mining and research and development company using a lot of clay things worldwide. And they ended up selling their project, or selling the campus, actually, I believe it was in 2014. But you'll see the way the layout was here. So you had your typical, well, in this case, it was kind of a typical landscape. We didn't put porous pavement in. We used regular asphalt, but under the asphalt, we integrated porous pavement subbase, so the water could percolate through there. We didn't have fines, and when you don't have fines in a conventional pavement system, you don't have freeze and thaw in the winter environments like you would typically on a regular pavement. So after like 10 years, there was no impact to that pavement whatsoever. And I haven't been out there in the last couple of years. So you had standard pavement, bioretention, everything worked this way through a extensive green roof, intensive green roof, intensive green roof, extensive green roof, integrated bioretention, waterways, visible water elements, and this is kind of how the pieces went together. So bioretention, water goes from the pavement into the bioretention. It moves its way through into the next bioretention. It's just an integrated system. Rain gardens, water moving down, coming off the roofs, now vegetated green roofs, mind you, and then 3 areas of basically what I would call large rain gardens that with an overflow that goes out into the main stream corridor behind there. This is a prairie stone. And it basically never breaches. It just doesn't breach. And, just some cross sections of how those pavements and the bioretention systems fit together. Now that's a more suburban corporate campus, if you will, and here are some of the rooftop gardens, and then the extensive. This is the extensive roof on the north side. Ann Arbor Municipal Center, this was a LEED Platinum project. We brought in a close friend, colleague of ours, Herbert Dreiseidel, a German landscape architect and water artist who always makes, integrated rainwater design healthy as part of his solutions, and we've worked together on a number of projects over the years. So you can see, we always want to make water visible. Make it visible, make a connection, get it back into the ground where it belongs. Don't send it anywhere else. And it works really well when you do that. And people really like it. A little closer to home, Villa Park Police Station, built back in 2004 or 5. Extensive green roof, porous pavement, bioretention. You can see as was being constructed here. We came back years later and asked them, how long does the water pond in the bottom of this bioswale? And they said, there's never been any water in the bottom of the bioswale. We've never had any water leave the site either. Lutheran General, if they didn't build with green infrastructure, they wouldn't have been able to expand and build this new hospital complex. Because they just didn't have the physical space. So it has extensive green roof systems. The roof systems come down, tie into rain gardens that are on either side of the porous pavement. The whole thing is just one big absorptive sail. And interior rooftop gardens that are all incorporated into the design. We're really kind of we're limited by our imaginations, I should say. Iowa State University, so education, whether it's at the university level or local schools. This is the Biorenewables Laboratory. All the things that I'm talking about here were incorporated in here. This was the first project at Iowa State, and we worked on about a half a dozen that incorporated rainwater harvesting and reuse for gray water in the buildings. And you can see some of this. Right next door to it is the College of Design King Pavilion, which is a LEED Platinum project. Again, green roofs tied into bioretention with porous pavement systems, so on and so forth. We worked with the University of Chicago to develop water-wise design guidelines. Basically did a study looking at every part of the campus and how where water falls, where it comes off, and how it could be accommodated in green infrastructure systems to eliminate runoff. And we worked on a similar sort of thing with UIC in their climate commitments. This was more of a conceptual project back a few years back, but illustrated how all different sorts of green infrastructure systems could be built into the campus to achieve their goals, but also provide a lot of benefits. And one of the things, that we've actually looked at and worked on is, in the athletic fields, they need water. You don't want them to be soggy, so why not build infiltration or like stone chambers, if you will, big bioretention chambers underneath those fields, allow an element of irrigation to be built out of them, have a healthy field, and be part of your kind of neighborhood-wide stormwater management project. How are we doing on time? Oops, I'm going to really fly through here. This is, Murgot Middle School. This is out in Aurora, actually, and just same sort of thing. Water coming off into visible panels. Panels take through surface water, go into bioretention. Same thing here. The city of Chicago has done a really big program in terms of redeveloping their elementary schools. Most of them had historically just been covered with asphalt. And kids are out playing in asphalt parking, or these big asphalt lots. And so we've done, I think about four different projects where the whole thing just gets incorporated into play, water management, and integrated systems. Community parks, this is Parsons Park. Make them fun, make them work, make them provide education and outreach, interpretive opportunities, how the world works, but all treat water as a resource. And then play in it. This is out in Park West, which was Splash Canyon Park, a spray park in Oregon, Illinois. A little closer to home, the Fountain View Recreation Center in Carroll Stream. All of the elements I've talked about, all designed together, basically no runoff. Queens Botanic Garden, another project, this in New York, where we worked with Herbert Dreisaitl and built an entire new campus, a new administrative building, and water is featured everywhere. It's all from collected rainwater. It's all from recycled water. They have no runoff, but that water is visible. It's a beautiful element. It's a uniting element, if you will. And I'm running out of time here. I'll show you the Kresge Foundation in Michigan, in Troy, Michigan, just because it's kind of how the pieces that we put together. Again, a LEED Platinum project. It has a retention area, but the retention area is really, part of their whole aesthetic. And so they had, this is how the whole thing kind of fits together: green roofs, porous pavement, bioretention, rainwater harvesting. They have a large above-ground cistern. They can be quite, beautiful. And education is a critical part of what they do with native landscapes. A little closer to home here, we have the Peggy Notebart, which we built several different kinds of green roof systems, and then rainwater harvesting and recirculation. And I want to get to, of course, all sorts of opportunities for community efforts and fun community. Here's a rain garden with fish in Ann Arbor. And you can do conservation development projects where you take a conventional 1 acre lot and turn it into a half-acre lot, build about a third to a half less infrastructure, have no runoff. Everybody opens up onto restored native landscapes with trails and integrated parks and open space areas. You save a lot of money, and people love it. This was a project, Pokagon Band, the Potawatomi, same thing in Michigan. For the elder community there, porous pavement, you get it. I mean, I'm going to go through you can do this at home. You can retrofit, you can build new infill projects with green roofs. All the projects, everything's integrated to do the same. You can retrofit your house. This was actually my little house in Elmhurst for 33 years. I built porous pavement before they even had any of the interlocking porous pavement available here in the U.S. They imported these polyethylene inserts from Germany, so it provided the structural capacity and the ability of the water to go through. And then I built all these rain gardens, and I planted all these native plants, and it was fun. And took a heck of a rain to ever get water to go over that system. And of course, why not at your local fast food restaurant, where McDonald's built a prototype green at McDonald's in Chicago with green roofs, integrated rain gardens, porous pavement systems, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, the last sorts of things at the more broad community scale. This is actually from West Union, Iowa, which was the Iowa Pilot Green Street Initiative, which we started the design and through visioning in 2008. And by 2012, the entire thing was built out. We took the 6 blocks of their downtown, dug up everything, pervious sidewalks, pervious parking, pervious streets of different kinds, integrated bioretention, geothermal heating and cooling, high efficiency, everything. And this is what it looked like to start with. And this is what it looked like afterwards. It's been very, very popular. Interpretive elements, lots of community events. And then you can do this more at a neighborhood scale too. This Charles City, Iowa, after the 2008 floods, they had all kinds of problems, undersized storm sewer systems. And so we worked with them to basically build green streets. Came in, incorporated porous pavement, integrated bioretention, and they actually have so little runoff from this neighborhood that the down gradient neighborhoods don't flood anymore, and they're capable of passing in their 2-year storm sewers that were designed originally. They're capable of passing those storms without getting overwhelmed. And we've done that more locally over by the Quad Cities, again, taking streets that were just beat up and falling apart and building green streets initiatives. These are cost effective, you can get grants. It's just, really good stuff. And I'll leave it at that. But, the last thing I'll say is we need these urban green infrastructure systems. And then we need to take this intelligence and spread it out into agriculture. Because climate change, unfortunately, our conventional row crop agricultural systems have contributed greatly, when they put it that way, to the climate problems we're having. You may remember the dust storms back in 2023. 6 people died, 30 injured. This isn't just bad soil management or bad land management. It's criminal. It's criminal. So. Our legacy of conventional row crop agriculture, our runoff, our erosion, our pollution, where it goes to the Gulf of Mexico, where the dead zone just keeps growing every single year, and 25% of it comes from Illinois and Iowa alone. And it's not just in the Gulf where we're having problems. Look over at Lake Erie with their blue-green algae, that's toxic blue-green algae. So, it really needs to think about where we can turn into a kind of agriculture that's more cost-effective, generates more revenue, and a heck of a lot better for the environment. And Chris Jones, if you're ever looking for an interesting article to read, Chris Jones was a professor in the University of Iowa Civil and Environmental Engineering Department. I actually have a copy of it with me. He wrote The Iowa Singularity, and it's pretty hilarious about the impacts of and he didn't even talk that much. He talked more about the economic impacts in it, rather. So, basically, integrated green infrastructure systems can be incorporated in any environment across the full spectrum of environments, from urban to rural, to provide multiple ecological, economic, and social benefits that unite aesthetics and function. And thank you very much for your time.
All right, everybody, we're going to get started here. If you're still finishing up lunch, take your time with that. But we're going to have Brad Andresen from the village of Algonquin. He's the chief ecologist and horticulturalist over there, and he's going to talk about a case study at the Dixie Creek corridor.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've got the unenviable task of being the person to follow up a fantastic lunch. Talking to Tommy, at least it wasn't, barbecue and baked beans. So hopefully you guys are well rested, well fed, and that I won't put you to sleep. So I'm going to talk today about a case study for the Village of Algonquin using the Dixie Creek corridor and talking about some of the projects and design principles we've used within the green infrastructure in the Village of Algonquin. We're going to go through kind of watershed overview. I like to do the zoom way out, 10,000 foot view, and then zoom way in to the nitty gritty. So we'll talk all the way back from the planning stages. We'll talk about some of the historical conditions and challenges we face within the corridor. We'll talk about watershed planning, and then implementing the plan. And then my favorite topic, which is the maintenance of the green infrastructure. You'll probably hear me say multiple times throughout this presentation, maintenance is key. You can design and you can install whatever you want, but if nobody's there to take care of it, or if there's no funds available to maintain that landscape, it is just going to fail and revert back to, as Jim was saying, at the prior presentation, the usual suspects of Phragmites and reed canary grass, so on and so forth. Then at the end, we'll talk about some of the benefits and successes that we've seen on this smaller scale that we've seen within the Village of Algonquin. So once again, just overview, Dixie Creek watershed, it is a sub-watershed within the larger Jelky Fox River watershed. It drains approximately 1,000 acres within the Village of Algonquin. Got the little circle up here that shows Dixie Creek. The Jelky Fox River watershed is kind of interesting because there's not one large tributary that's the center of it. It's the section of the Fox River, and you have a lot of small, Jelky Creek, Sleepy Creek, Sawana's Creek, Lake Marion Creek that all feed into it. And Dixie Creek and Rat Creek, Village of Algonquin is up here in kind of the northwest corner of this watershed. So taking a look at Dixie Creek watershed, this is the 1939 aerials. If anybody's a historical map nerd like I am, this type of stuff is what I do on the weekends when my wife is like, hey, Brad, what are you doing? I'm like, just checking out old historical maps of the area so I can go into the woods and find some cool stuff. But this is Dixie Creek in 1939. If you take a look at this, we've already really disturbed the environment here. There are no original landscapes left except for a couple of pockets. This little corner is very steeply sloped, so it was unable to be tilled. Everything else has been modified. It's under agricultural production. Historical conditions, there probably was no creek here prior to European settlement. It was a series of wetlands or small depressional areas. The creek only popped up because what did we do? We came in, we plowed the prairie and the wetlands, and we put in artificial drainage, ran them to the low point, and this is turned into a glorified agricultural drainage ditch. All the way up here in the corner, you can see there's lots of erosion. There's a nice little delta forming in the Fox River from all of this washing down and coming out into the Fox River. Flash forward to 2025, and we have just swapped one type of artificial drainage for another type of artificial drainage. Rather than agricultural use, this is a solidly developed suburban environment. We have approximately 5,500 people living within the watershed, about 1,500 single-family homes. There's a school, there's a golf course up here. You see all the stormwater detention basins all feeding down into Dixie Creek. Some of the historical conditions that we face within the Village of Algonquin within this creek corridor are some areas where we would have some flooding. And this flooding occurred relatively frequently, most often in the spring and the summer months. This is one particular area, it's called Reach 5, where it goes underneath one of our roads. This is all second growth volunteer invasive woodies. When it rained, it would plug up the culvert, it would overtop the road, and then dump into an artificial impoundment just on the other side of the road called Lake Braywood. And then that too would clog, flooding houses, This house here, unfortunately, flooded multiple times in quick succession because of these issues. Remember these pictures because I'm going to come back to this site towards the end of the presentation. As we kind of zoom into the areas, we have issues with eroded stream banks. The stream had downcut through the soil and had become disconnected from the floodplain. There was no floodplain, so when it rained, the water would just speed up and rush straight downstream, taking everything with it, woody debris. It would take a lot of soil. Along with that, it was a lot of nutrients that are tied to the soil particles. One of the big problems here were these debris jams. It's kind of hard to tell from the picture, but this is about 20 feet wide, 5 feet thick, and 40 feet long. Every time it rained, that woody debris would be dislodged. It would come down, it would clog our infrastructure, overtop the road, causing us to close the road, flooding houses, flooding yards. The other thing from a public works perspective is we would get the phone calls in the middle of the night that our backyards are flooding, the road is flooding, and we would have to send guys out in a little dinghy in the middle of the night, paddling through to the outfall structure of this online detention basin and sit there with axes and shovels trying to pick our way through the woody debris to be able to open it up to let the water flow downstream. So not only was it damaging private property, our infrastructure, our public infrastructure, impacting travel and roads, there was a safety risk to the employees that were sent out to rectify or try to rectify this problem. So many communities have problems such as the flooding on Dixie Creek that we've observed. What do you do about it? How do you go about fixing it? It all starts with a watershed plan. Who here has heard of watershed plans? Hopefully there's a lot of hands. All right, fantastic. So watershed plan, take a look at a watershed scale. Watersheds expand over multiple boundaries. This watershed doesn't stop at the Algonquin line. And taking a look where the water goes is a really important tool used for prioritizing projects. So in 2012, actually take it back a couple of years, in 2010, Kane, DuPage Soil and Water Conservation District got an EPA 319 grant to fund the creation of the Jelke-Fox River Watershed Plan. Watershed plans are a multi-year endeavor where you reach out to all the stakeholders within that watershed, municipalities, local residents, community leaders, businesses, professional organizations, and you get together and you do a site assessment, a full site assessment of all of the streams, waterways, detention basins within that watershed. And as part of that, you come up with priorities. You take a look at every one of those water bodies and you rank, hey, where are your worst problems? Where should you prioritize your efforts? In the village of Algonquin, these are the sites that were highlighted within the village of Algonquin as potential project sites and were listed with individual project descriptions. So as part of the watershed plan, you were given lists. So the village of Algonquin, Carpentersville, Dundee, each had lists of projects. This is stream and riparian corridor restoration sites where you have a project site, description, approximate cost, and then most importantly, you have the ranking. How important is it to address these? Is it a critical need? Is it high, medium, or low priority? Once the plan is created, it gets approved by the Illinois EPA, and then it's up to each individual municipality or local unit of government to adopt that as an official planning document for their community. Once that's done, that really opens the door to be able to receive grant funding and funding opportunities for construction of some of these projects. For example, this list within the village of Algonquin, since the plan was created, we've been able to go through and systematically knock out a lot of these projects. So we've been able to complete them. One of them was completed even before the plan was finished. But then we've been able to kind of go down that list using this planning document to be able to prioritize funding and grant opportunities that come our way to get these projects addressed. We have one here that's designed, it's ready to go, it's designed permitted, we're just waiting on funding. And then the rest of the projects are on our list as future. We'll get to them, as we have time, but we were able to knock out all of these critical projects. Here's a good example of one, Sewanas Creek, that we did a couple years ago. We were upgrading the road, and we went from an old, poorly designed box culvert to a more of a three-sided culvert that was a lot larger, sized appropriately, reduced flooding, and then it also realigned the stream so that it didn't have to do a 90-degree bend underneath the road to be able to get from point A to point B. Along with this project, we did riparian area restoration on either side because we utilize green infrastructure and ecological design principles in all of these projects whenever we can. So speaking about green infrastructure and ecological restoration, it's important to ask yourself a few questions as you approach these projects. What is ecological restoration? Typically, it is restoring the ecosystem using native vegetation, and you're usually trying to go to pre-European settlement conditions. As I show with that 1939 aerial, if we did, pre-suburbanization, we would be restoring it with row crops. We don't want to do that. So we're going more for the pre-European settlement conditions. There are lots of design, permitting, and maintenance considerations when going through these. Most importantly is making sure that you have some experts on the team who can come up with a site-specific plan. Each site's different. We're working with living organisms, living ecosystems, so it's not just a rinse, wash, and repeat system. You need to take a look at the site as a whole, develop site-specific seed mixes that utilize the local environments, the soil types, the hydrology of the site, and then also take a look of what are your end goals. Are your end goals primarily water quality? Is it erosion control? Is it aesthetics? Is it biodiversity? Because it's going to look a little bit different. For example, in the village of Algonquin, we don't restore things with the intent of having it mimic 100% a remnant ecosystem. So I'm not putting in seed mixes that have 100 native species in them. I'm doing 20 or 30 native species that we know we can manage, we can compete well, and will survive in these environments, rather than going for full-blown massive diversity, because that's not our end goal. We're not trying to replicate or recreate a remnant ecosystem. We're trying to get something where we're getting these ecosystem benefits, we're reducing erosion, but we also get some of the benefits for local pollinators and other of those water quality benefits as well. When looking at stormwater detention basin design, this is an example of one that went in an old golf course. Looks a little bit different than your typical rectangular 3-to-1 slope straight down to the water level. So when you're designing these as green infrastructure, it's really important to take a look at the cross section. And for example, we have a small section here where we design a shelf for emergent plants. That's from normal water level to about 12 inches below normal water level, where you can plant species that like to have those wet feet, and they can grow up and protect that shoreline from future erosion. You have that transition zone. This is where you have that bounce when it rains and the water goes up and down. You want to have another species mix that goes in there that can take times where it's inundated and they're underwater for a couple of days, but they can also deal with those more drought conditions. Last year we had pretty severe droughts, and a lot of these areas didn't receive a lot of water during the year, so you need plants that can still survive that, those time frames. But then if we have a wet spring, for example, they need to be able to take being underwater if we do get a heavy rain. And then above that bounce, you have your more mesic species, so the species that can deal with those drier conditions. If we're looking at our riparian areas and our streams, a lot of design considerations are needed with those as well. One of the ones, this is a picture of a project that was done in Lake in the Hills, just north of the village of Algonquin. And this kind of shows really, really well the floodplain bench that we put into these designs. So here we have the stream coming down, and you have your riprap protection to protect the outside of the bend from erosive forces when water's coming around the outside of the bend. And then when the water raises during rain, we have a shelf that's above that. We call it the bank full elevation. What that does is that allows the water to spread out and slow down during rainfall events rather than to just speed up and shoot downstream. Allowing that water to spread out and slow down gives it more time to percolate through the soil, recharge our shallow water aquifers. It also provides opportunities for the plants to filter out nutrients in the water, in the stormwater. And the nice thing is after a couple of years, these plants grow up, and they grow up through the riprap, they grow up in the floodplain bench, and I've had a lot of people that I take to these sites go, this looks like it was always like that. You don't see the engineering that goes into it after year 2, 3, 4, 5. It kind of fills in, and to the layperson, they walk by and they just think this is how it's always been, not knowing that it was very specifically designed for the function of handling the stormwater, handling these peak flows, and even the riprap and the rock that we put in as stone toe protection, that fills in with sediment over time. It fills in with plants. They kind of move in and they help lock it in place. And this picture was taken only 2 years after the completion of this project, and you can't really even see that riprap on the outside of the bend. This photo here is taken where you can see they're shaving back the lip, the eroded lip, and they're putting in the stone toe protection. So it is something that during the construction phase, I'll show some before and after pictures. It does look like a bomb went off. So that's something that's really important for community outreach and engagement of letting people know some of these stream restoration projects, when they go in, it's intensive. It's not something that you go in with a light touch. A lot of times you're using heavy equipment. It looks like a bomb went off for the first couple of years. So being able to get out in front of that, communicate with the residents that live adjacent to the site is very important to provide that level of expectation. Otherwise, you'll get a whole lot of calls of angry people, what are you doing in my backyard? Here are some before and after pictures of Dixie Creek Reach 3. We completed this project in 2023. These are all, I tried to take them in about the same position, but this is the before picture. You can see the site is just pretty much overrun with invasive vegetation. There's a lot of that second growth, a lot of buckthorn, honeysuckle. Problem with that is it created a canopy so dense that there was nothing growing on the soil surface. So when it would rain, water would rush down, take all the soil with it. We had, relatively severe stream bank erosion on the side where the banks were just slumping into the creek, causing sedimentation issues downstream. That online detention basin I was telling you about, Lake Braywood, was having a lot of troubles with sedimentation. It needed to be dredged. It could probably need to be dredged again. And a lot of this is from the eroded stream banks that we were having issues with. This is after the tree clearing came in. We marked what trees were to be saved on the site and then had to come in and remove them. This is the bomb went off phase. This is when I get most of the calls because everybody freaks out and they go, oh my goodness, what did you do? You find all sorts of stuff at this phase. We find little Tykes play sets. I found cars. I found tents. I found nefarious growing operations that I didn't want to think about too much about what was happening out there. It's pretty amazing what you find when you come in and you start cleaning up these areas. But this is the point where the public starts to get upset if you haven't been able to do that education. And even if you do, you will get calls. No matter how much outreach, I sent letters to every homeowner around this site. We had a website that was updated twice a month with pictures. We had public meetings, and still the first day we had machines out there, I received a few calls. They're like, we didn't know this was going to happen. I'm like, well, we sent you a letter. We had it posted on our website. We had public meetings. There's a website for this. We knocked on doors. There's been signs up. But how can I help? After the construction was completed, This is how the site looks after everything's been stabilized. You can see that we've really lowered that eroded lip and provided room for the water to spread out under those heavy rainfall events. We've got our erosion control blanket. We do use BioNet and everything, so I was really glad to see, Tommy, you bring that up earlier. But this is what it looks like right afterwards. And then really short order, this is 1 year. So this is July 2023, this is June 2024, so not even a year, and we're already starting to get things filling in. We got Rebecca blooming. You can see we planted trees. So we do replant trees in these, but it's much wider spacing. So we're going for more of the savanna look where it's 1 to 3 trees per acre, typically what we do in these areas. And again, as part of the communication to the residents for the site is don't expect a privacy screen. Don't expect the green wall. That's not going to be there anymore. We will have trees back in the area, but it's not going to be that thick wall of vegetation. And I think that's really important to communicate because one of the biggest complaints we get when I probe people as to why they're upset about the project, it's the loss of privacy screening. And then being very clear that the Village of Algonquin, it is not our responsibility to provide privacy screening between neighbors. That's something if they want to put screening up on their own property, that's their prerogative, but we're focused on making sure that areas don't flood, that we don't have erosion, and privacy screening, while we'll take that into account, that's not the primary goal of these green infrastructure areas. Now my favorite topic, maintenance. Like I mentioned before, maintenance is key for these. I've said it to many people when I was in private practice and in the public sector. If you don't have a maintenance plan or a way to fund maintenance of these areas, don't do the work. There's no point. A failed restoration project does more harm to people wanting to do this work than if you don't do it at all. So it's really key to have that management plan and funding mechanism in place before you start the project. Establishment phase, so the first 1 to 3 years of the project is really key for the success of the project. Typically that first 3 to 5 years is your most time-intensive, labor-intensive maintenance cost for the project. You're gonna have more visits. The first year, I always say, first year sleep, second year creep, third year leap with these native plants. So the native plants the first year are really small. All those opportunistic annual and biennial weed species come in and they flush really quick. So the first year you might see 70% of the vegetation are those annual or biennial weeds that need to be mowed off, need to be spot sprayed. Second year, it's usually 50-50. By third year, you should be about the 70% mark for native to non-native vegetation. This is kind of a cool picture because you can see those ecosystem services come back right away. This, big old fat monarch caterpillar found the swamp milkweed growing, and this site was only seeded, I think, 3 months prior to that. So it doesn't take long for some of these insects to come back and start utilizing these areas. Long-term maintenance is once the site hits establishment, so that 3 to 5 year mark, it rolls into our long-term maintenance program. It's key that these maintenance activities are different than your traditional landscaping. So your normal traditional landscaper is not going to be able to do the type of maintenance needed to keep these restored areas healthy. You have things like prescribed fire in your toolkit, spot herbicide treatment, and then a lot of times very specialized equipment. This is about a $250,000 aluminum tank called a Marshmaster that has very low ground pressure. It actually puts less pressure on the ground than walking on the ground surface. It's less than 1 PSI. And this has a herbicide wick bar that applies herbicide directly to the plant rather than spraying it into the atmosphere. So these specialized pieces of equipment and knowledge are needed by the contractors or employees, whoever's doing the maintenance on site. In the village of Algonquin, we have, and Michelle alluded to this earlier, a 3-year maintenance program. Our first year, we do a prescribed burn, and we do a post-burn herbicide treatment. The burn is a great time to be able to observe the site. You got a clean slate. You get a quick flush of plants that come back, so you can quickly move through that site and either spot mow, spot treat, whatever you can right after the burn. The second year, we do multiple maintenance visits, and it's gonna depend on the quality of the site. Some of my higher quality sites, I only have 2 visits a year during this maintenance cycle. Some of them that need a little bit more help might have 3, 4, even 5 maintenance visits during that year. And then the third year, the site is fallow. We just monitor it. It's really important that during this monitoring phase, you're keeping an eye and you can be reactive. So sometimes you might get a stand of Phragmites that pops up. You wanna go hit that. And that we use this third year as a time to do kind of those, I call them my seek and destroy missions with a lot of these sites. This long-term maintenance program is forever. This is perpetual maintenance. Unfortunately, our ecosystems have been modified so much that we can't take our foot off the gas and expect any of these small areas to be able to sustain on their own without this continual maintenance. So it's really important to have a plan such as this in place to keep these areas healthy. Looking at more of a cost-benefit analysis for some of this work, this is pulling a lot of the information straight from CityWorks like Michelle had shown you earlier this morning. So these are 2026 numbers for the village of Algonquin. So actual numbers, we have 161 sites that we maintain as turf grass, approximately 220 acres. And the contracted cost for that service is $465,000 a year. Contrast, we have 301 acres of established naturalized ecosystems. I pulled out the ones that are in the establishment phase because they're kind of artificially high maintenance costs. So 301 acres of established natural areas across 42 sites. And our annual cost for maintaining those areas is $150,000 a year. So quite a difference when you're comparing your managed turf areas to our naturalized ecosystems. And this is a good example. This was a basin that was a turf grass basin that looked pretty similar to this. And now instead of mowing it once a week and having True Green come through and spray it twice a year, it's a very minimal burn, a couple of herbicide visits or spot mowing visits, and then a monitoring over a 3-year period. So a lot less intensive maintenance. Remember I showed you the pictures of the flooding, Lake Braywood? Well, here's some data around our flooding complaints and calls for that site in particular. This is the project that we completed in 2024. This is what it looked like before, and then afterwards, we went through, removed all that second growth, woody vegetation, stabilized the stream banks. One thing this picture doesn't show, there's like 15 trees that went in there. It looks really bare, but I promise it's not like that right now. But looking at those service requests, so you guys all saw when I put in a request on my phone and it popped up in our system and I got an email. Residents can do that, so every time it would rain and their yards would flood, we would get service requests for this area. So between 2017 and 2024, we averaged 7.5 flooding service requests just on about a dozen homes that surround this area every year. It was 61 flooding complaints that we had to go out and address different issues. Since we completed the project in November of 2024, it hasn't been that long, but I'm liking the trend. We've had 0 service requests for flooding since the project was completed. So far, it's been a drastic improvement, and one of the main reasons is we removed that source of woody material that was clogging all of the culverts that was the main cause for the flooding of this area. Taking a zoom out to the entire watershed, this is the same map I showed you earlier. We've been able to complete 27 projects within the past 23 years, much thanks to the leadership of Michelle. It's really important to have a cheerleader, a person that drives the projects forward within each municipality. These don't happen on their own. You need somebody at the forefront really pushing leadership, pushing, driving to get those grant opportunities. We were able to restore 170 acres. It was about $6.25 million in construction costs to complete these 27 projects, but we were able to receive about $780,000 in grant funding. We've seen dramatically less flooding along Dixie Creek, and that's kind of immediate response to all these projects that we've done here in the Dixie Creek area. Taking a zoom out a little bit further, across the village of Algonquin, we've restored over 50% of our open space. We've received about $1.5 million in grants and completed about $10 million of green infrastructure projects. This has really drastically reduced our flooding complaints across town. I just gave examples of one creek, but we've seen that on all the other waterways within town. We have a lot less, we have more intense rain, but less flooding complaints. It's pretty nice when it can rain 3 inches, and before we would be running out in trucks, closing roads down, fielding calls, filling sandbags, and now it rains 3 inches, and I'll look at Michelle and be like, let's put on our rain jackets and go see what all the streams look like. But that's the extent of our response because we don't have roads flooding anymore. It's really nice to be in that position of, let's just go see what it looks like rather than, oh boy, we got to go shut down roads. Where we are at now is we're continuing to work and drive these plans forward. All the watershed plans within Algonquin, we did an update process last year, which went through those lists of projects, marked off which ones have been completed, and then sometimes your priorities change a little bit. Something that was in good shape back in 2012 might look a whole lot different now. So reprioritizing and updating those project lists, that was all done last year. We continue to design, implement, receive grant funding for new projects. We've always got 1 or 2 in the wings, and then I've always got about a dozen on the back burner. So if some opportunity comes up and somebody's like, hey Brad, there's a grant opportunity. You have any projects? I'm like, yes. Here's 3 million of them to complete. Do a lot of public outreach. Tommy, I think that's you. This is at Dixie Creek Reach 5 doing a talk and tour series with McHenry County. So I'm always inviting people out to see the sites. I love doing these talks in auditoriums, but my favorite place to do these events are out in the field. So this is an open invitation. If anybody wants to come out and visit some of the sites, it's a really good excuse for me to get out into some of these sites. So please, look me up and I'm happy to show you around some of the sites. We also participate in the Winter Chloride Watchers program. It's really fun when I get to put some of my guys who are out in the salt trucks in the winter, and I then turn the tables and say, hey, I need you to go check for salt levels in our creeks. They're like, wait a minute, why are we doing that? And I can explain the backstory of the impacts that it has. So to see that enlightenment from the crews that are actually out there, hearing about sensible salting techniques and why we're saying we're only going to put down 100 pounds per lane mile when usually we do 300 or 400 pounds per lane mile. And then they can see the impacts of that on the chloride levels in the creeks. It kind of comes full circle for the crew, and it's a really awesome integrated approach to maintaining the health of our green infrastructure in the village of Algonquin. I think I am right at my time, but we might have a moment or two if anybody has any questions. All right, well, thanks so much for having me out.
Hello, everyone. That was really interesting. I don't know why he said that was going to make us fall asleep, because I loved that. But now is the real snooze fest, because who wants to talk about building codes? Yeah, right? Okay, so I'm Allison Lindberg. I'm the Director of Sustainability with the City of Aurora, our first Sustainability Director. We have never had a Department of Sustainability until July of this year with our new mayor. Although we've had people working on sustainable projects, we now have a staff dedicated to sustainability. I'm very happy to be here today, and I have to admit, I don't really know anything about water, so this has been really interesting to me. My background is more in architecture and buildings, and I'm going to be here to talk about energy efficient buildings with you today and some of the strategies that the City of Aurora is working on. That being said, how many of you are familiar with what energy codes are? Okay, so I thought that might be the case, and that makes things a little bit easier for me, actually, because I'm going to give you just a really quick background, and you're going to learn what energy codes are, and then you're going to learn about advanced energy codes, and hopefully you won't fall asleep, but if you do, I won't hold it against you. I know, it's warm and cozy in here, and it's cold outside, and that was a really nice lunch. So, everybody here probably knows about Aurora, but I'm going to talk about Aurora. I'm going to talk about sustainability. I'm going to talk about stretch codes, which if you haven't heard of energy codes, you probably haven't heard of stretch codes. We'll talk about how they get adopted and what we're doing to support them. So Aurora, as you probably know, is the second largest city in Illinois. Some fun facts: the first city in the U.S. to light its street with electric lamps. Home to the state's first free public school, and we actually have 4 counties within Aurora, which makes things really interesting from the water side. So I've heard, again, I don't know anything about water. The last thing I'll say as a fun fact, in case you didn't know already, is that we have a data center moratorium. Who here had heard about that? Yeah, I would love to hear from anybody here that wants to talk about data centers after the fact. Please come see me. I'm really interested in especially water impacts on that. So the City of Aurora, even though we didn't have a sustainability department, we have had a sustainability plan since 2009, and that got updated in 2019. And some of those goals included facilitating the adoption of renewable energy by adapting building and zoning codes. And it specifically calls out the adoption of stretch codes. So let me just give you a quick primer on energy codes. Number 1, buildings are responsible for 40% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Just think of all the energy that buildings use. So that's why building codes are really important. An energy code basically sets the bare minimum for energy conservation of a building. Not all states actually use energy codes. Some of them are adopted at the local level. You might be surprised to know that Illinois actually has a statewide energy code that all municipalities are supposed to adopt and enforce. There are a few minor exceptions to that, but for the most part, it's supposed to be mandatory across the state of Illinois. Local jurisdictions do provide the enforcement of it, and what it basically mandates is the regulation of energy use like insulation, how efficient your windows are, how efficient your lighting is, appliances, and how efficient your heating, cooling, and ventilation systems are. So basically everything that uses energy within your building. The standards are set and they're updated by basically 2 main bodies: the International Code Council, which is called the ICC, which is confusing to some people, and because we have the Illinois Commerce Commission if you work on the utility side, and then ASHRAE, which some of you might be familiar with. They're updated every 3 years at the model national code level, and then local jurisdictions or states adopt them. So, a stretch code I'll get into in a little bit, but just to say, your jurisdiction is probably enforcing the state's energy code right now. Our sustainability goals wanted us to adopt something stronger than the state energy code and essentially get us more renewable energy, more efficient buildings so that we can achieve a goal of 50% renewable energy by 2025. Our new mayor wants to incorporate affordable housing into this scenario and wants energy efficient housing to be locally constructed. And so we're doing some workforce development on that. So what is a stretch code? So a stretch code is basically an alternative to that statewide code. And up until very recently, jurisdictions didn't have that option. You had to basically do what the state energy code was or nothing. And it basically gives municipalities a policy tool to meet climate and energy goals, and it helps accelerate the market into doing more advanced building techniques. So stretch code requirements may also be included in the future what we call base code, which would be the state code. And that's why it's called a stretch. So Illinois is technically a min-max state. That means that the local jurisdictions cannot require anything less efficient than the state code or anything stronger than the state code, except for some commercial buildings. So again, up until, I guess, 2021, when the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act was passed, which is called CEJA, their municipalities didn't have this option. It basically mandated the state to require what is called a stretch code. And this statute actually set these net zero readiness targets within the stretch code. So once a municipality adopts the stretch code, it then takes the place of the state energy code and it becomes the mandatory baseline. So basically the least efficient building that can be built in that jurisdiction. Stretch codes are not new. There are examples all across North America. I'm not going to go into the details here, but just wanted you to know we're not some bright shining snowflake in Illinois that is doing this for the first time. This has happened in lots of other municipalities. So just to give a little bit of flavor in terms of energy efficiency. So if you're looking at the Site Energy Index, which is basically something that the Pacific Northwest National Lab uses to model and determine the energy efficiency of a building code. It goes over the 2006 edition of the energy codes, the IECC. And so on the left side here, we have the residential base code for Illinois, and then we also have the residential stretch code. So we were at the 2021 base code, and in November of this year, the new 2024 base code became mandatory. If you are a jurisdiction that adopted a stretch code, it became available for adoption of January of 2025, and the new stretch code, which will be stronger than the existing stretch code, will be available sometime this fall. All of this is to say that if you look at the efficiency, basically we went from 32.9% more efficient to 38.2% more efficient in this just code update. And if you want to look at where this current stretch code is, it's 40% more efficient, and the new stretch code will be 50% more efficient. The next stretch codes will be even more efficient, basically getting us to net zero readiness. So basically making the building as efficient as possible so that if you put renewables on it, it then becomes net zero in terms of its energy use. So this is residential. The other things, and again, I'm trying not to bore you all since you don't know what these acronyms mean, but the residential stretch code is based on the 2021 IECC, and then they had to increase the efficiency of it, and then they also have mandatory readiness measures that go with it. On the commercial side, it's based off of the 2024 IECC. And you'll see here that the commercial code was already a lot stronger than the residential code, and that it's getting up to 60% more efficient than the 2006 IECC. All of this is just to say that we're moving forward. And I think it's important to know that at the national level, these numbers are not going to be hit. The model codes are not going to get to 60% more efficient over the 2006 IECC. So this is really important if you want to take big steps on the energy efficiency side. So in terms of the requirements for this stretch code, so this is residential. All of the buildings have to meet readiness measures, and readiness basically means you don't have to do the full thing, but you have to put in the components so it's ready for it. So you have to make it solar ready. That means that you have to designate a solar area on the roof, and you have to have a place in your electrical panel that can connect to solar if it goes in earlier. Same thing for EV ready. You have to have an EV readiness component, even though this is kind of moot here because the state requires it for single family. This also goes for multifamily. Electrification ready, and then also demand response capable. So these are all readiness measures that have to be for every single building, no matter what. And then you can choose different compliance paths. And I like to categorize it, it's tier 1 and tier 2, because tier 1 is basically that efficiency that we in that table. But tier 2 is like the cream of the crop. That's basically super, super efficient. And if you want to take that option, you can, but it's not required. So all of this to say that there's a lot of flexibility in how these energy codes get met. We just have the readiness requirements first, and then builders get to choose whichever path they want. Same thing for commercial. The one difference here is that commercial also requires energy storage ready. So they want you to be able to put backup battery storage in there in the future as well. So when you're considering adopting the energy code, there's a couple of things to look at. You want to understand the cost and its impact on development. Now, I hear all the time that people are going to go to another jurisdiction if Aurora adopts the stretch code. And I have done a lot of research in this in my past life working in Midwestern communities that were doing stretch codes. And that's just not the case. People are going to develop where people want to live. So if people don't want to live in Aurora for whatever reason, then they're not going to build there. It's not going to be because of the stretch code. I will also just say increased costs, especially in this construction climate, is a big consideration. We will be doing a cost analysis on the new stretch code just so that we understand that impact. And as a city, we're also looking at different kinds of financing mechanisms to potentially make up for any increased cost burden. Then you also want to think about, which code and for how long until implementation. So a municipality could adopt the residential stretch code or the commercial stretch code or both or neither. So maybe you just want to adopt commercial first and then do residential later. And then how long until it actually gets implemented? How long do you give people time to train? So that's another thing, training of staff in industry. I'll go into that in just a second. You want to think about how is it going to be enforced? How does it affect your permitting process? Do you maybe want to incentivize it first and try to get people to do it without it becoming a requirement? And then you also want to think about what does the local workforce look like? Will you have enough people that can actually install ground source heat pumps, for example? I chose that specific example because I figured it might actually tie into you all going into the ground, but maybe not. Maybe you don't deal with ground source heat pumps. Okay. Anyway, so some of the benefits of stretch codes. There are energy cost savings. Decreasing utility bills is increasingly important. I know we all saw big electricity hikes over the last year. We're expecting more to be coming. These buildings, they're very efficient, and so they really do lower the utility bills. And this really, especially on the affordable housing side, makes it more likely that people can pay their mortgages or their rent if they're built to this stretch code. Also, it helps to build a clean energy workforce. You're going to have to train staff and the industry to understand some of the building techniques and construction that's required. This makes that local workforce more competitive. Buildings that are more efficient are safer and more resilient. They're more resilient during extreme weather events. They hold up longer, and they provide longer time to shelter in place because basically you won't have to leave your house because it's still cool if it's really hot outside and your air conditioner stops working. They also are said to promote healthier indoor air environments. According to the American Lung Association, energy efficient buildings are shown to contribute to lower rates of asthma. So that's really important if you have health problems. And then last but not least, it helps meet sustainability goals. Buildings are less carbon intensive when they use less energy. There are a couple of support programs already available for the Illinois Stretch Code, and then the city of Aurora is also considering some. So ComEd as a utility actually provides adoption assistance to municipalities that are interested. They provide free training and education. They provide fact sheets and checklists, and they're also working on aligning their current incentives with the Stretch Code requirements. The Illinois Green Alliance and the International Code Council will provide free plan review as well. And then some incentives that we're considering at the city, and I say considering because we're very much still looking into these, is reduced permitting fees for those that do the stretch code, especially those that go to the higher tier, expedited permitting, and then, as I mentioned, an early adopter program. So if they take that higher tier going to passive house or net zero, then potentially they get more incentives and more access to financing. So for financing, we actually just passed, officially last night, commercial property assessed clean energy financing at the city of Aurora. I'm very excited. I'm going to give myself a hand for that. I don't know, how many of you here are familiar with CPACE? Okay, I see one person. The reason I bring it up here is because I've heard that water conservation projects can actually also apply for CPACE financing if your county or city or village has it. So that might be something to look into. They usually like to fund very large projects. This is a program that's offered through the Illinois Finance Authority, so please look into it. Happy to talk about it. We're also looking at doing something similar for residential, maybe some kind of revolving loan fund or RPACE. And then we're also going to be piloting some stretch code homes to provide on-site training, and we're working with a local workforce hub that is through the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. I just wanted to provide a couple of examples here, just so you know I'm not pulling your leg. These are the amazing tools that ComEd will provide to your jurisdiction. If you're looking at adopting stretch codes, it explains everything about them, including those checklists that I talked about. And then last but not least, these are some of our next steps. So I'll just go down into the middle. We have set up a stretch code advisory work group that we're pulling together some local experts and residents to help us actually assess whether the stretch codes should be adopted or not. I anticipate this to be a fairly contentious ask of city council, just because everyone is concerned about the cost of housing, which I think is valid. So we are going to be hiring an estimator to get really local numbers on the cost impacts. And as I mentioned, we're going to be piloting at least one home built to the stretch code tier 1 and one built to tier 2, so that we can provide training, but then also understand how can you build like this and what the actual cost impacts are. We're also looking at putting some of the requirements of the stretch code into our development agreements or our RDAs, and we are providing training and education to our staff already. So then we'll be having all this public feedback. We will go to city council and hopefully have it be adopted. In the meantime, we're already looking at how to align planning and permitting, and we anticipate after it passes that there will be a 6-month window before it actually goes into enforcement. So that being said, the last thing I want to leave with you is that the city of Aurora is hosting an event called Green Fest on May 2nd. We would love for you all to be there. I'll have Jasmine raise her hand. We will have tabling opportunities there. It's a free event, but we're obviously looking for sponsors. And yeah, we would love to see you there. And please contact Jasmine if you have questions, and contact me anytime, especially about data centers or if you have questions about stretch codes. Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody. The only thing standing between you and the rest of your afternoon is me and my chance to talk about something that I'm very proud about, which is a sustainability plan that the Village of Downers Grove adopted last year. I am Jason Michnick. I'm the Environmental Sustainability Coordinator for the Village of Downers Grove. and sharing a little bit about our sustainability plan and how that came to be. I'm going to start off with a little bit of context of the environment for which we kind of established our plan. So when we think about ecosystems and watersheds, as everybody in this room knows, they are a little stubborn about respecting the well-established, legally documented jurisdictional boundaries that we all work within, right? And that is just something that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Polycentric governance is this really cool academic jargon that basically means who tells you how to do your job and who is on the other end of the line when you call to ask somebody for advice, right? In other words, it is basically a description of the relationships that we have when we're dealing with problems such as navigating watershed agreements and things like that, right? So we have relationships between higher levels of government and our local governments. Those are those vertical relationships. We also have working groups that we might collaborate with across local governments. And then you can get really fancy, and sometimes you have relationships between both of those. When we think about the local level and we think about kind of the authority and influence that we have, we can kind of think about spheres of influence, right? Administrative functions, those are things that we can control, that we can be flexible in day to day. A little bit more advanced, but still within our control, are those policies that our elected officials that we make recommendations to them that they can adopt and we can regulate at the local level within our jurisdictional boundaries. We also have community level coordination. So we think about government fragmentation isn't just across our municipalities, it's also within our municipalities, right? So we have partners that we work with in other local governments that overlap with ours. And then we get to the scale of the regional coordination. So why do I bring that up? How do we go about setting sustainability goals and plan implementation in this context? So this is kind of the background before we even started our sustainability plan, kind of what we were thinking about. When we did our sustainability plan, we also did an update to our comprehensive plan, an active transportation plan, and a downtown streetscapes plan. If you're thinking to yourself, that's a lot of planning, yes, indeed it was. It took us 18 months to get through this process, but there was some really significant advantages of doing all 4 of these at the same time. You start to realize that there's some synergies, some overlap in your planning efforts, and also some conflicts, right? So when you're setting one goal for one plan, is it in conflict with the goal for another plan? And which one weighs out and which one is a priority? So the first step in our guiding DG process was to kind of take an evaluation of the environment, right? So we called these existing conditions reports. We did one for each one of our plans. In the sustainability plan front, this ended up being a multi-chapter evaluation. So we looked at all of our organization's past efforts regarding sustainability. We did a whole lot of public engagement and weighed people's opinions and sentiment about the environment and their priorities. We did an emissions inventory for both the community and our organization. We did a climate risk assessment, and we did an inventory and assessment on things like our canopy biodiversity, waterway quality, land use, and then quality of our natural areas. This is, again, a basis before we even got into the planning process and started to establish goals. The way that we went about this for all 4 plans is our village council acted as the steering committee. So their job was really scope refinement and clarification and setting direction for each phase of establishing these different planning elements. And then we also had various commissions and consultants and staff that were the ones that did the bulk of drafting the content that went into those plans. So to kick off our planning effort for the sustainability front, we had a workshop with our elected officials, our village councils, and we asked them kind of 4 specific questions to really kind of figure out what they were looking for, right? So one of them is, what does sustainability mean, right? It's kind of a broad term, can mean a lot to a lot of people. So we came up with a shared definition of what that means. We also asked them what the intention or purpose of the sustainability plan was. Why did they want to do one? And what does success look like 2 years out? We asked them, this is one of the most important ones, right? Is this for us as an organization, or is this a sustainability plan for the entire community? And then as Greenest Region Compacts, raise your hand if you're familiar with the Greenest Region Compact framework. Okay, a few of those. So this is actually a regional effort through the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. Quite a few municipalities in the region are members of this consortium, but it basically provides a framework for what municipalities and local governments can do to be more sustainable. So we're members of this. There's a framework that kind of guides you to being sustainable, but it also has like 450 different actions in it, right? It's really comprehensive. So we asked them, how literally do you want us to use this framework? Or if there's particular issues within it that you want us to focus on. And some feedback that we got was, this is our definition. So being environmentally sustainable is the continuous and conscious effort to act strategically in service delivery and policy making in ways that preserve resources and enhance the natural environment for future generations. And I'm kind of bolding the important parts of that, right? So is the continuous and conscious effort, right? Service delivery and policy making. So this is something that our council discussed of, is this just something we're doing in operations? Are we actually going to use our authority to create policies that further these goals in the community? And then also this concept of intergenerational equity, right? So we're doing this not just for us, but also for our children and our children's children. This is a big one too. Do not limit the plan to village operations only, but we really need to get our house in order before we start telling others what they should be doing, and we should lead by example. So that's really the foundation for how we were gonna go about developing our plan, but then also we were like, how are we gonna do this? How are we gonna do goal setting for the community and the organization at the same time? They also mentioned that they really wanted the plan to slot into existing processes that we were doing. So it wasn't just something that created completely new processes that we had to carry out moving forward. And then in regards to the GRC framework, they kind of said, it's great, but we really need something that's easier to understand and to track and monitor. So we, with that direction, developed an outline or a structure for how we were going to go about drafting our sustainability plan. So pretty straightforward in terms of kind of what you'd see in a plan. But where we got into it was in terms of the goal setting and the vision. That was something that was going to be for the community as a whole. And then we were going to establish some village objectives and then have an action plan for the village. And then we were going to figure out how to engage the community in these community goals. So the structure of the plan, we created these 5 themes, which we thought kind of captured everything that we heard from the community was really important. So we have energy, ecology, mobility, parkways and parking, materials and resources, and governance. So those are our 5 categories that we slotted all of our goals into as buckets. And I will say, going into the sustainability plan, this was a new role for the village when I started. And I came into it thinking that we were going to be doing something similar to a climate action plan. So this is a type of sustainability plan that really focuses on greenhouse gas emissions. Something that I thought is kind of the trend of where sustainability plans were going at the time. And when we did all of our public engagement, we really found out that nature was like the most important thing to our community, right? Took a lot of pride in the natural areas that we had in our tree canopy. And our community really wanted us to focus very heavily on kind of nature-based solutions and strategies, more so than emissions. It's totally okay. The mobility, parkways, and parking was interesting. When we looked at our habitat connectivity, we realized that we, as the village, maintain a whole lot of right-of-way, and those right-of-ways, there's a pretty unique opportunity for us to think about those as natural corridors that connect our natural areas. So that's kind of what that theme falls on. Materials and resources is really mostly about waste and recycling. And then governance is really kind of back to that concept of polycentric governance. But the structure of how we establish our vision around those themes is we have these vision statements, one for each that kind of connects what the current problem is, and then what it looks like 20 years if we were actually to be successful and make it better. And then we have these community goals. So again, these are things that aren't just for us as an organization, but for the community at large. And then we also developed recommendations for the village as an organization, either in operations or policy making, that directly align with those community goals and how we can support them. with the authority that we have, right? So this is what we can do through our daily operations or what we can do through policy making. On the village objective side, we also had operational objectives. So these are really just statements, action statements that set kind of intention, right? What are the things we want to get better at? What are the environmental impacts that we want to reduce? We also had a 2-year action plan. And the reason it's a 2-year action plan is the village has a process we call long-range planning. This is basically every time that we have an election, we have a new village council, they establish a 2-year work plan for that group. So the idea that we were going to have overlap between that work plan process that was already in place and what was in the sustainability plan was our way of achieving against slotting it into an existing process. And that 2-year action plan, there's a couple assessments. We're going to do a waste audit for our operations. We're going to do a biodiversity assessment for our tree canopy and village-owned properties. And then we're also going to look at all of our facilities to identify opportunities to reduce energy use and emissions in our facilities. On the policy front, we're going to do a zoning update. Pretty standard after you do comprehensive plan. So we acknowledge the areas that from the sustainability plan go directly into the comp plan and the zoning update. So this is things like EV readiness, energy codes, stretch codes, things like that, and dark sky community, landscaping ordinances, all that kind of stuff. And then the last one is looking at our purchasing policy and our bid specs to see if there's ways that we can actually reduce environmental impacts through our purchasing and contracting. And then we had a handful of projects in our 2-year work plan, things like replacing streetlights to more efficient LEDs and dark sky compliant fixtures, implementing a new solid waste contract, which we did a couple of months ago, and now includes composting and organics recycling and no additional cost to our residents, putting in EV chargers at our village facilities, and a resource guide, which I'll hit on. So that's our plan from the village operations standpoint. But one of the things I really want to hit on to this group is public engagement, right? So one of the things that local governments are really, really good at doing when it comes to public engagement, especially during the planning process, is doing things like surveys, open houses, and focus groups and workshops. Anybody have an idea what these strategies have in common? No? This is all a really great way for you to ask residents what their opinions are, right? So this is awesome, and I don't want to discount this because it is really important that you engage your residents when you're establishing a vision in your planning process. But the bigger question too is, how do you engage your residents in the implementation of those plans? Are you simply providing an update on what you're doing as an organization? Or are you treating your residents in your community as a resource in and of themselves to achieve the goals in the plan? So we came up with this idea to engage the community through a sustainability pledge called the Greener Way Pledge. And it's basically a pretty standard process that anybody can individualize for their own lives. This recognizes that we're all kind of in a different place in terms of our sustainability journey. It's based in the concept of an ecological footprint. So it's a step-by-step process, right? Understand your impact, identify ways that you can reduce your impact, plan if you need to, and then take action. And we can apply this across any topic because sustainability is incredibly broad. Since the adoption of our plan, we've been working on a launch strategy. So we're inviting other community stakeholders and organizations to help us promote the pledge. So we came up with some use guidelines and a press kit, official logo. It goes with stickers and swag and all that cool stuff. We're also working on a guide. So this is basically a resource guide for residents to help them understand how they can support community goals. And then we're also tracking kind of who signs up and developing communication strategies for those that want to participate. So that guide that I just mentioned, we're just wrapping up and it's going to get published here in the next couple of months. So we took all of those themes, we divided them into like key topics. So we have like 25 sustainability topics, and across one of those, we developed basically action items for each one of those steps of the phase, and each one of these actions comes along with like a link to a website or a report or a video that provides more information or a tool that residents can use. And the reason that we're doing this is because this is an umbrella for us to really kind of think about how we engage the public and communicate with them, but it also provides residents, like I said, with some information on how they can actually partner with us and support achieving those community goals that we set in the sustainability plan. So some key takeaways. So first, right, fragmentation. Think about it, recognize it. We all work in this area where this is a specific, unique challenge. It requires us to coordinate and collaborate, and also understand the landscape that the regulatory environment that we're working within. When you are doing goal setting, make sure that it's appropriate. Don't set a goal that requires other people to participate if you don't have their buy-in and you don't have a strategy for how you're actually going to engage them. I also would say that doing planning efforts and creating a sustainability plan is a foundation for change, right? So this has become a way for us to experiment and try new things and change the way that we talk about certain things in our operations. And then lastly, in terms of public engagement, don't just ask residents for their opinions, and don't just provide them with updates on what you're trying to do to support your strategic goals, right? The community, stakeholders, the organizations in your community are the most powerful resource that you can have to promote sustainability. So here's a QR code if you're curious about taking a look at our sustainability plan. And then guidingdg.com is the website that we had that has all of our plans if you want to take a look at those. Yeah, and that, have a good afternoon, everybody.
All right, can we get one more round of applause for all of our presenters today? Okay. And then I got a few more things just before we head out here. Again, thank you all for coming out today and taking your time. Again, we'll have the Slido up, so this is where you can, if you just take a picture of it, you don't necessarily have to do it now, but just so you have it on your phone, if we can take a survey. Have any suggestions or anything that you liked, didn't like, can be improved on, just let us know. We're always open to feedback and for looking to improve this for the years to come. And again, if you are looking for CEUs too, make sure you have your email. It's either, if you registered with your email, you should be all good and we'll be able to send those out later on. If you don't have that, you can check with the front desk as you're going out just to make sure that we have those on file, just so you get those credited. But if not, again, thank you all for coming out and yeah, have a good rest of the day.